Okay, we will call to order this study session for March 12th. We have 5 council members here, so we do have enough to have a quorum, even though we won't be making any votes. So we'll start with Judge Feldman. Judge Feldman, welcome.
Thank you very much.
And I will let you go ahead and talk to us a bit about the two suggestions you have on your associate judges.
Yeah, and I submitted 2, plus indicated that a third person was interested also, who the council is familiar with already.
Chair.
So the 2 that I submitted directly, is it okay to just name them by name?
Yes.
Okay. Tracy Dawson, longtime attorney and associate municipal judge. She was the #1 relief judge in the city of Englewood for a long time. And then the city of Englewood had I think it was a charter change, maybe an ordinance change, but a charter change that required that all the judges be residents of the city of Englewood. And of course, Englewood is the only city, maybe there's one other, maybe Longmont, that has an elected judge too as their main judge, presiding judge. But in any event, Tracy was the associate judge for a long time. She's also been an associate judge in Wheat Ridge and Aurora and other municipalities, and has an excellent reputation. And of course, she appeared in front of me as an attorney when I was a county court judge, and I also interacted with her when I was an attorney and she was an attorney. And she is a very diligent, committed person. I've never heard a negative thing said about her. Lots of positive things. The other applicant is Ben Courier, who's a Littleton attorney. He's in the Miller building at 1901 West Littleton Boulevard. He's been practicing about 10 years. He's an outstanding young attorney who has no judicial experience, but he has experience in the municipal courts, and he's handled a lot of cases in the Littleton Municipal Court as a defense lawyer. He does criminal defense work and is very, very highly thought of. In fact, he was the Arapahoe County Bar Association's Young Lawyer of the Year several years ago. And that's a very prestigious award given by the 1,000 or so member Arapahoe Bar Association. It's named in honor of Tommy Drinkwine, who was an outstanding young lawyer here in Littleton, and of course the name Drinkwine is very well known to all of you. Tommy unfortunately died suddenly at the age of 32 some 30 years ago, so the award was named after him. And Ben is just a very diligent, highly intelligent attorney, and one of my thoughts is that it's always good to develop, if you want to use a sports analogy, a bench for the judiciary bench. That's maybe a double analogy or a triple metaphor, I don't know, mixed metaphor. But any event, he's the type of young lawyer, and I say young advisedly, he's got the 10 years under his belt now, who if he likes the judicial job in Littleton, at some point would be someone who would be a perfect fit for a district judgeship later on in his career, or who knows, the council might think he'd be a good fit here at some point later on. But I think it's good to give people an opportunity to develop their careers, and he's already an accomplished lawyer. And then the individual who said that he was interested in the job, and you know him, is Steve Katzman, who was an associate judge here for some 23 years, I think. And I have not gotten into any discussion with Steve about any of the circumstances under which he no longer has the contract here. but I know the city council is well aware of Steve's qualifications, his abilities, and whatever the contract situation was with him. And I like Steve. I've known him for a long time. He's practiced in front of me when I was a county judge. Did a good job as a lawyer all the time, represented his clients well. I never did appear in front of him when he was a municipal judge, though. He took the municipal bench just a couple years before I took the county bench, and I just never did have the opportunity to be in front of him. So those are the three people I am putting before the council at this time. And I'm thinking of that 3 is a good number to have for relief judges. I would certainly, some of the ones who are closer in would probably be called upon on a more regular basis. Tracy lives in Roxborough, so she's not very far from here. And Ben is just up the street. Steve is working in Colorado Springs still, I think, and living in the Conifer area, the last I heard. But I think having 3 people would be good. As you know, I'm spending most of the time here, and there's really no reason other than wanting to give other people an opportunity that I can't cover things for the most part. Haven't had any situations yet where I've needed any relief, judges. So any questions? Mr. Cernisek.
Judge, thank you for coming and proffering the folks in front of us. 2 questions, and you can answer them in whatever sequence you'd like. One is, would you suggest we interview them from your perspective, recognizing we can make our own decision? And then secondly, with Ben, first time on the bench, what would be the plan for mentoring and having that kind of training in that development?
First of all, as to whether council should interview, obviously as to Steve Katzman, you know Steve, and that's, but again, you may have some questions for him as to some circumstances, but that's within the council's knowledge and not mine. As to the other candidates, I think they're certainly talking to them would give you a comfort level with them. They both present themselves very well. I think it would be good for them to hear directly from council what council's expectations are. I think it would probably get, if you did choose them, I think it would get the relationship off to a very good start. And then as to Ben's mentoring, he's expressed that he would be eager to have some mentoring in the area, do some ride-alongs, and of course he has seen judges at all levels in action, so at least he knows what it looks like from one side of the courtroom, but certainly it's a kind of a different view from the bench. He would, we'd have a few formal dates from time to time, but he would also come down, walk the 70 paces down from his office, and come when he has time, when there's a specific docket type. What I did with Judge Anderson, and he was so accommodating, and I'm very appreciative of that, is that I figured out the various types of docket days and what was being held on various days. So I made a point of coming on a few times for every different type of docket. You know, there was the review docket on Thursday morning to see if people are following up on their court-ordered probation or their suspension of their sentence on certain conditions, watching how the trials go on Thursday afternoons and Monday afternoons, and then the huge docket on Wednesday afternoon, where there's anywhere from, I guess next week we're going to have over 100 cases on a Wednesday afternoon. So, you know, I made a point of making sure that I got exposure to all of those, and that's what I would do with Ben. And Tracy, of course, is the type of person who believes she's never going to stop learning until she can no longer be around. So she would want to, she's expressed that she'd want to see how things are going also. And of course, I could learn some practices from other courts from her too. So it'd be a two-way street. And Ben could also give me some perspective as to what practicing lawyers think about how things are going in the city court.
Any other questions? Okay. I think it would be a good idea for us to meet with the judges and get them on a, do you have any urgency? What's your timeline on this? Because we could probably get them into a study session in, I'm thinking in April or.
I don't see any urgency. The powers above willing, of course. April 25th is the Municipal Judges Conference, and I'm planning to go to that so I can pick up some tips from my contemporaries. And April 25th and 26th, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
We're going to set light dockets for those days.
And we have you back on April 9th.
Right.
So perhaps we can do it then.
Okay.
Would that be? Then I would ask counsel, where do you stand on Katzman? Bruce?
Yeah, well, I guess I was going to suggest that maybe, on one hand, since he's been here before and presuming everybody's okay with it, we could theoretically tee him up earlier for an emergency. In case there were, God forbid, something where we needed relief, for a month out. I don't have any major problems. I thought his departure was not quite what I would have anticipated, but in retrospect, he's been a good relief. Seems like he's been a good relief judge for a number of years. So I think okay.
It'd probably be worth bringing him in with the others to talk to him, because I don't think new council have. Jerry's not met him. Phil, have you met Steve? I don't think Bruce may. Bruce may have it in another.
Well, I think just to deal with Bruce's perspective, to have an emergency backup that's under contract before that doesn't mean that we wouldn't have a conversation with him. But something like that, would certainly be an okay approach.
Okay, it's a month. So do you feel like we need to swear someone in next week? Okay.
I don't see that.
Okay. I'm not concerned about that.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine.
Because that goes into, if it is Katzman, we still have the issue with him and the contract. And so, okay, well, why don't we do that? Why don't we plan to meet them and on April 9th, and Steve also. And I think it'll just be a casual conversation, not a real, I guess I'm not seeing it as a super formal interview. I think your recommendations are strong. They look strong. And based on what you said about them getting to talk to council and council talk to them, I think that's a good. Peggy?
So if we did that on the 9th, then we would approve that at a regular council meeting after that?
Yeah, we'd have to approve it and swear them in on this.
I'm a great believer in trying to not play the timing too close, because the very time that you think there's not really a problem, you may come down with the flu for 2 weeks or whatever. So is there any way at all to move it up, maybe put it on the 26th?
The 26th is full. The 26th is probably 4 hours. We could do a special meeting. We could hold a completely different night.
And there's not a rush, though, too.
Right.
Yeah. April 9th,
I don't-
and then approve on April 16th.
And we can always move the docket a day or two if something happens, and then we can make a quick decision about what we need to do.
I don't feel a sense of urgency. Of course, who knows what matters are in our control and out of our control. And I don't know if the charter allows for this, but I suppose if some dire emergency came up, that council could swear someone for a designated short period.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
actually, I think Judge Chris might even.
Yeah, I was thinking of Judge Christ.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we'll go ahead with that plan, April 9th, and then based on how all that goes, we can get them sworn in, that next, do a vote and a swearing on Tuesday. You guys will have to figure out how that works on the agenda.
We'll get them, we'll contact them, and we'll schedule them first for starting at 6 o'clock on that
Perfect.
April 9th. And then we'll put them on for the 16th. Yeah, we can contact them, Judge.
Okay, you need, I think I gave you contact information.
Yeah, I'm
On
not
there.
sure. Yeah, I don't know if we have Ben's, so if we could get Ben's from you, that'd be great.
There's a phone number and email on his resume.
On Ben's?
Okay,
Perfect.
sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And
Appreciate
if you decide you want to have a larger pool, just please let me know. And I mean, there are a lot of people who are interested in doing this kind of work, so, and that are good people.
I guess at this point, I think if everything works out and the three are sworn in, I think that I'd like to suggest that we run with that for a while and see how that goes. And if we do see that, because with Judge Anderson, we ran with it for a while, and then there were some things where there were just collisions of schedules, and he did ask us to bring in Judge Vigil at that point. So we can do that if we need it. At this point, though, I think we usually run with 4.
Okay.
So, okay,
Sounds right.
awesome. Thank you. Peggy?
Can I ask a question? So you say you have a docket next Wednesday with 100?
In the afternoon, about 100 traffic cases.
So that sounds mighty full.
It's full, but
It's doable, huh?
the city prosecutor is good at talking to people and reaching agreements with them, and
So you're
Cutting
not
to
really
the
expecting
chase.
to, okay.
there aren't any trials scheduled.
Okay.
It's all agreements so that people come in, first appearance, and most of the cases settle.
Okay, thank you,
She's real good at triage.
thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Judge.
Thank you.
Mike? Oh, my God, I'm choking. He's in DC still.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Mike Broughton, Deputy City Manager, here to talk to you on disposable bag reduction. In your packet, there is a memo that I prepared. Wendy's got some handouts that I've asked her to hand out. I was contacted today by the Colorado Restaurant Association. They lodged a concern with moving forward with something that may impact the restaurants. And then also the report from the community survey looking at the level of support for environmentally friendly programs in Littleton, and, which includes both this bag issue as well as some other items that may be of discussion. First off, going back to the memo, some background. Generally, this is bag reduction strategies are considered for sustainability, waste reduction, and litter reduction purposes. There's an average of about 300 to 500 bags consumed annually by Americans. Back in 2012, Littleton Economic Development staff estimated that about 7.4 million bags were consumed per year in Littleton. The City of Boulder did an estimate that about 342 disposable bags are consumed per person per year, and with about 300 of those being plastic. So it lays out the framework, the groundwork for some of this. Bag reduction strategies that have been done, there's about local governments in about 30 states have pursued and implemented some form of bag reduction strategy, ranging from an outright ban to on paper and plastic to fees, educational campaigns, etc. In Colorado, there have been 11 municipalities that have explored bag reduction strategies. There's 271 municipalities in the state, so just only a handful actually moving on anything. Aspen, Carbondale, Telluride have a ban on plastic with Aspen and Carbondale with a 20-cent fee on paper bags. Telluride has a 10-cent fee on paper bags. Boulder will soon be implementing a 10-cent fee on paper or in plastic. In Basalt, actually, the Council of Basalt passed a 20-cent fee on paper and plastic bags, and that was overturned by voters in 2012. Two municipalities are currently considering bag reduction strategies at Fort Collins, and they've got a number of options, and Mountain Village will mirror Telluride's proposal. Back in some legal issues behind bag bans. Back in '93, there was a state statute adopted that essentially would prohibit local governments from banning a specific, well, here I'll read it out, specific type of plastic material or product, or restrict or mandate containers, packaging, or labeling for any consumer product. Arguably, that would limit your ability to ban the use of plastic bags. However, it would not prohibit, if you were interested in imposing a fee, it would not prohibit that. As I mentioned earlier, in spite of that ban, state statute, there are 3 municipalities, Aspen, Carbondale, and Telluride, that have banned bags. So moving forward, options for consideration. You basically have the action of a no action item, which would leave us where we are today. Establish a fee on plastic, paper, or both. Institute a ban on plastic, paper, or both, or an educational or outreach campaign. A fee on plastic and paper bags, generally some strengths on that. Less litter, retains customer choice. Retailer and industry generally favor that over a ban. Moderate reduction in disposable bag consumption. There is generally then a cost recovery option for the city and for retailers. It's more of a who pays model. Yes, Mayor.
Are we talking about banning them completely, or are we talking about charging people if they use them?
You have the option of banning, adding fees, doing nothing.
Okay.
So it's up to you for consideration.
Okay.
If you were to move forward, some of the downsides of the fee: difficult to implement, lots of administration, education required. It has a potential to affect low-income households more so than most. Costs to retailer include collection, training, and administration. If you were to go forward with a ban, which arguably could be against state statute, but it's easier to enforce, less litter, largest reduction strategy. It requires education. The city, in some instances, the city has actually provided reusable bags to citizens. It removes that consumer choice, generally not supported by industry or retailer. There's no cost recovery because you're not collecting a fee then if you ban them outright. Consumers must purchase reusable bags, and sometimes there's a loss of business to neighboring communities. Lastly, the educational campaign, generally preferred by retailers, retains customer choice, minimizes cost to consumers and businesses, although it generally also results in minimal reduction in bag use. There's still administration and educational campaigns that are required, and there's no cost recovery to the city to pursue those. Other issues, I had mentioned that we were contacted today by the Colorado Restaurant Association. They had heard that we were taking this up, and they sent us a letter today, and that's what Wendy, I believe, provided one of those to you. Their main concern being sanitation and liability. If someone were to, if they're not allowed to use new bags, there's concern with cross-contamination of customers' bags coming in and liability issues surrounding that. The Colorado Retail Council also submitted comment, which I actually included in your packet. Their concern is that if anything were to move forward, it should be applicable to both paper and plastic, and it should be applicable to all retailers, not just large footprint, so including those small retailers as well. And I listed a number of issues up for consideration there as well in the memo. If you were to move forward with this, you would be meeting a few of your goals and objectives, promoting environmental sustainability, and the objective of reducing environmental impacts and reducing waste. And if there is a desire to move forward, the recommendation from staff would be to begin an educational outreach campaign and engage some of those likely impacted retailers. If there is a desire to move forward with a fee, the City of Boulder moved forward with a first-of-its-kind nexus study regarding the fee, and that is something that probably should be considered here as well. Boulder spent about $19,000 on that fee study, and staff estimates anywhere from 10 to 15 for us. We're quite a bit smaller. So that's what I have for you on bag reduction. I'm happy to answer any questions or if there's additional information desired. Oh, and included in your packet as well was Councilmember Stallman's analysis from last year. And then also I did hand out I mentioned this chart. You'll note that we did survey on plastic bag reduction, and it was the one of the lower supported items. So.
Bruce, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think I will. And I'll be brief, but then again, not so brief. to be hasty in our deliberations.
Nothing wouldn't be.
I'm going to, let me start with essentially some context, more of not to regale you with economics or statistics or minutia, but more of a big picture context story, if you will, that doesn't have as much to do with plastic bags as it has to do with the municipal code itself, which oddly enough appears, when you go back and look at it at a high level, to be something of a time capsule. And I mean that in the following regards. Here's a handful of things that are regulated by our municipal code. In Title III, business regulations encompass circuses and carnivals, peddlers and hawkers, hand-bill distributors, coin-operated vending and amusement machines, taxi cabs, pool and billiard halls, massage establishments, escort bureaus and adult entertainment, placement of news racks, licensing and registration of construction supervisors, off-track betting, industrial temporary labor halls, and of course, everyone's favorite medical marijuana centers. Now, in Health and Sanitation Title VII, obviously things like garbage and refuse, sewer, noise, weeds, rubbish, and derelict vehicles, storm drainage, and my personal favorite, products containing ozone-depleting compounds. So Code Section 7-9 applies to approved motor vehicle refrigerant recycling equipment, food packaging, fire extinguishers, insulation material, major refrigeration systems, and in particular, Section 7-9-4 says, no person who owns or operates a facility which installs, services, repairs, or disposes of motor vehicle air conditioners shall allow any service involving the release or recharge of refrigerant on a motor vehicle air conditioner to be performed without properly using approved motor vehicle refrigerant recycling equipment. The intentional venting or avoidable release of refrigerants from a motor vehicle air conditioner is also prohibited. Section 7-9-10 says, effective January 1st, 1994, no person shall sell, manufacture, or install any material or padding or building insulation that contains ozone-depleting compound or with respect to which an ozone-depleting compound is used as a blowing agent during the manufacturing process. Now, the reason to go through that list isn't to that it has necessarily anything to do with plastic bags other than this. At some point in time, for our community, a majority of council members deemed that all of these items could or did infringe upon the health, safety, or welfare of the community, or to at least have sufficient nuisance value such as to warrant regulation. Now let's talk briefly about plastic bags. According to the Carbondale ordinance that Mike referenced, this is actually in their ordinance. It says 2 million bags are used annually in Colorado, 5% of which are recycled, so 1.9 million are going somewhere. The Telluride ordinance specifically says that 12 million barrels of oil in the U.S. are used for bag production, and those are actually in the ordinances. They're not just, presumably they got them from a source, but I thought it was interesting that they were referenced. I guess what I'm going to suggest to you is that plastic bags then constitute, in all probability, at least as much of an infringement upon the health, safety, and welfare of our community, both Littleton and broadly, or have equivalent nuisance value as many of the items that I listed off previously, not the least of which is ozone-depleting materials, which is, in fact, already regulated in our code. From a sustainability perspective, then what do we mean by sustainability? I think the Fort Collins, you didn't talk about it, but it's in your memo. And I was up in Fort Collins a week or so ago presenting to their city council on something that had to do with an urban renewal process that affected one of our thrift stores in our chain. And I sat through their meeting, but they use what they refer to as the triple bottom line concept, which is referenced in your memo, extensively and as a litmus test for a lot of decision-making activity broadly. And I thought it was actually very good because it's easy and it keeps a focus on really the three legs of the stool, which are economic parameters, environmental parameters, and community parameters. And presumably the ordinances that they're passing have to pass muster with respect to all three attributes because they use it, as I said, as a test when they have their deliberations. I'm going to suggest to you that the plastic bags probably do some limitation on plastic bags from our perspective would meet a triple bottom line test. So first, perhaps and foremost, the purpose of the memo, the white paper that was done, that I did last January, was to get a sense of the magnitude of the potential economic benefit to the businesses in the community that use plastic bags. And I have to go back and look, but I think the conclusion on the whole thing was that there was roughly a $500,000 to $1.2 million of incremental cash flow on a net present value basis to businesses in Littleton, retail businesses in Littleton that use plastic bags, from King Soopers and Safeway down to Ace Hardware and People Less. I won't go back through the details of the memo. It was there. You guys can read it, and it's been out there for a while. I think sort of also from the economic development perspective is that a concept, I did want to mention as well, and Mike did mention it, but the Colorado Retail Council, as well as King Soopers, when I spoke to them, indicated that they were okay with the concept of some sort of limitation on plastic bags, as long as it was uniform. I mean, they clearly didn't want to get, have the bullseye on their back, and admittedly so. So I took that as a positive that they were willing and at least had had experience with this and were willing to consider the alternatives. From a marketing standpoint, I think general sustainability is one of the council's goals, is in fact forward-thinking and part of a consistent brand image for Littleton with our quality of life. It also is in fact part of a broader regional dialogue for people like Metro Mayors and Dr. Cog and other communities, because bags that get sold in Littleton can end up in Highlands Ranch, they can end up in Jeffco, they can end up in Centennial, and vice versa. And lastly is, in fact, the green element of this. And I don't know that that's necessarily, I know people can react viscerally one way or the other to green issues, but frankly, the elimination of plastic bags does not, or does seem very much in concert with a community whose focus is so intently on open space and the magnificent river park areas that we have. Said another way, it doesn't make an awful lot of sense, or it's at best a paradox, to spend all the money we're spending on having the river environment and the park and the open spaces such that, you know, a wayward plastic bag can blow through and spoil it whenever the wind picks up. I'm going to, based on the digesting of all of the stuff that was in Mike's memo, I don't think the ban makes sense. I think, broadly speaking, putting some sort of a fee in place that allows citizens to say, okay, I don't mind paying a nickel a bag or a dime a bag, and I want the convenience, and there's value to me there. I think doing that will cause a drop in plastic bag consumption that will have benefits as outlined, both, you know, well, as I already described, or as have already been described. But it does give people the right to choose, and if you want to pay and get the bag for your own use, that's great. You can do that. I also think that applying it broadly to retail, it makes perfect sense, both to plastic and to paper. But as the restaurant group points out, I think there are exceptions. So I think Boulder, for example, took newspaper bags out of the equation. And clearly, doggy bags at a restaurant would not seem to be the major offending item for purposes of what we're trying to talk through here. So that would be my preference and my pitch to the five of you here for something to either consider further or to ask staff to study and or to get in front of the citizens as need be.
Questions? Jim?
Well, I think my bottom line is going to, I appreciate all the work you've done, Bruce. You've spent a lot of time, and the report that you put out in last January was very comprehensive and just a lot of information in there. I think from my standpoint, I'm going to be opposed to creating a bag fee for several reasons. When you think of a lady going into to a beauty spa, and she wants to buy 4 or 5 of their products, they put it in a plastic bag because they have no other way to get it there. So this would include charges for everybody, whether it's a service organization or service facility like that, whether it's department stores, whether it's Home Depot, whatever. But I think that because our neighbors are not looking at a ban or looking at a charge, it's going to create some difficulties for our citizens and for our businesses. And I think of the brand new King Supers that's being built at Bellevue and Federal Boulevard. That will be opening up soon, and I will almost guarantee you it's going to be the largest grocery store around in the west part of Littleton and surrounding areas. Is going to get a lot of business, including the fact that the people who live closer to the downtown Littleton area, all they got to do is cross the river and get over there versus going to Broadway and Littleton Boulevard. So if Broadway and Littleton Boulevard are charging a fee for a bag, they can just go across the river and not have to pay that fee. And the distance that they'd have to travel is about the same, mileage-wise, not a lot of difference. So that would tend to drive businesses out of the city, I think, instead of trying to pull it here. I, like many of the others in this room, have done cleanup along the South Platte River. And we know how many bags are there. We know they come from all kinds of, not only grocery stores, but all kinds of other stores as well. And that is a major problem. The drainage ways that lead into the river, cleanups along there. We get bags and bags and bags of trash every spring when we do cleanups along those rivers. So I understand the problem. I know what the problem is. I just don't think that charging for a bag fee per bag is the right solution.
Any other questions or comments? Jerry?
So is this really about recycling, about helping the environment? What is the, you brought it up a year ago, but then Michael, Mike, you brought this up now. So what is really the purpose other than adding a tax?
Fee.
A fee, tax, I call it a tax because it's going to cost me more to get something that it didn't use, that's not there now.
We were asked to bring it forward. It was an item for consideration, and it's to meet the goals of council and your sustainability goals.
Cool, thanks. Well, I guess my first thought is, because when you first brought this up last year ago, January, I too went online and did some research to see, how, what cities have done it and what anecdotal evidence is there that it's really doing any good, and there is none. I couldn't find any other than it seems that this is, to me, it seems that's more of a nuisance tax, so it'll just make some people feel good that they're doing something. When I went online, I looked at production, because you did some great research, I do appreciate that, to look at production of a bag, plastic bag, versus a cloth bag. Cloth bags are far more expensive to manufacture, uses more water, uses more energy. There's the sanitary issue, you got bugs issues. Now, I know in my personal case, when King Soopers, if you remember a while back, they put a program in where if you came in with your own bags, I don't think they took a little something off. That was great. That was something that the free market was doing that, and I think it was very effective. I think, again, if we're doing this just to feel good, then let's go crazy. But then let's not stop at plastic bags. Let's start, paper bags. Let's go everywhere, of which I certainly don't want to do. But I really think the last thing Littleton needs right now is that we need to impose a plastic bag tax. I think households' budgets, they're all under pressure right now, and it just is not a good time to add any tax, in my opinion. I also, if we're really talking recycling, then let's talk about recycling. If we're talking about littering, let's talk about littering. We should encourage recycling. I'm concerned, too, that if this is about recycling, and so we're going to add a tax to it, then where does it stop? I know some of us recycle, some more than others, and some don't recycle. So are we going to tax those that don't do recycling in the city of Littleton? I just can't see this being practical. Again, when I went online and did some research, all I found was just feel-good stuff. I didn't find any hard evidence that says it's actually making a difference. Again, to make other products to carry your groceries in or other products from other stores, they don't come for free, and it does use energy to use them. So I think just saying no more plastic bags, I don't think is the way to go on this. So.
Phil?
Yeah. Mike, one of the options you indicated was education and outreach. And you didn't include it in any community that was embracing that as an approach with any kind of result, other than saying it probably would have the least amount of impact, but it also provides the greatest amount of choice, less intrusiveness, and gives us an opportunity to possibly go with some responsible bag use or container use.
And I'll point out to the kind of the pros and cons that I listed was from the Fort Collins triple bottom line approach. So what I was mentioning is,
And so, at least at one piece, I saw Boulder's draft for doing the Nexus study. What's their status in that study?
the study's been completed. The study found, I think it was 20 cents is what they recommended, and then council thought that was too much and went against the study and said 10 cents, if I recall correctly.
I believe you're correct.
Because at least I couldn't find the study. That was certainly possibly rolling this into just an overall awareness of what's responsible container use, recycling, and it possibly gets into one of our later agenda items, would be, at least the direction at this point in time, going through a cost for a study at this point in time, unless, and I appreciate there's an opportunity of revenue for retail establishments, but it also presents a level of complexity to some folks in their processes. It gives us a chance to kind of say, hey, here's some things that are being talked about.
Michael?
Just as an example, so council's aware, some communities have done competitions either with each other, so Inglewood and Littleton, seeing who can reduce the maximum number of bags, and you work with Safeways and the King Soopers, and they track those bags. Others have done it within the community, Safeway versus King Soopers, Walmart, that kind of thing. So there are some, I think, real-life examples if the council wanted to go that way. And I do want to state, Jerry, I do understand the word fee and tax, and you feel it's a tax, but I think just for clarification, a fee can be imposed and it's commensurate with the cost of providing that service or something. A tax requires a vote of the people, so there is a legal distinction.
Yeah, I understand the legal distinction. I also know that it's a tax, that if you're going to make somebody do something they don't want to do, or you're going to tax them, that is exactly what this is.
I understand.
If they don't bring a bag, guess what? You get to pay an extra tax.
As your city manager, I will continue to remind you.
I'm coming from a citizen's point of view. You're coming from a governmental point
I
of view.
am indeed. So thanks for at least hearing. Thank you.
Nice haircut, by the way.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bruce?
Just to sort of chime in on that, when I did the economic study or the analytics last year, the underlying assumption is that as far as it being a tax or a fee, potato, the intent ultimately isn't to collect. Ideally, it's not to collect any revenue, because essentially the only way you would collect revenue is if people bought the plastic bag. So the overall overriding intent was behavior modification to get people theoretically to start using more reusable bags so that they don't pay the fee. And once people got used to it, the anecdotal evidence of that was established pretty broadly, that once people got used to doing it, they would bring in their own bags, and then the whole intent was plastic bags. So realistically, the logic was that, at best, there were enough small percentage of plastic bags still being used and where the incremental fee was being paid that more or less offset the city's admin cost kind of stuff. So it wasn't a rev gen item that was never the intent, just so everybody understands. Yeah, no, and that was legit, was that if retailers don't have to print them, they don't have to buy the bags, the logic was then they get to either keep the incremental margin from that cost going away, or they can pass some or all of it back on to the customers in order to make it more attractive, which Jim sort of may go to your point, and I understand your point about people going to Inglewood, but theoretically, people are going to get the value of the bags, because if there's a 10-cent differential, for example, that gets spread to various products, ultimately it may be more attractive for people to shop in Littleton. This is really hypothetical. I mean, it's really theoretical. But if you're getting a better price, hypothetically, on your milk in Littleton, is that equivalent to getting a plastic bag for free in Inglewood? I don't know. Depends probably where you live. Like you said, if you live downtown or you live in District 1, you're probably going to the King Soopers at Federal, and if you live in District 2, you may go to Littleton and Broadway. So they are small numbers on an incremental basis, so everybody understands. But that was just a clarification. It was never about generating revenue. It was always about behavior model.
Peggy?
So a lot of people reuse their plastic bags. Some of them reuse them when they shouldn't because they got the chicken juice that's got germs, and then they buy something and it gets on with their fruit or whatever. They don't necessarily wash it. But that's a different kind of issue. I'm more concerned, I guess, myself, with not having the bags get into the environment, getting them up in the trees, getting them into the bushes that you can't get into to get them out of, getting them into the rivers, Jim says, and having to try to get them out of the river, off the banks, and so forth. So I'd much rather just help educate people about wise use of whatever the devil kind of bags they use. paper bags, plastic bags, because enough paper bags, sometimes the paper bag gets wet and you can't reuse it even to put your garbage in or whatever. So I think it'd be interesting to have a program on Channel 8 that looked at the impact of bags in the environment when they get out there, et cetera. Health issues if you reuse them and maybe they're dirty. But also the alternatives. If you use a cloth bag, how often, maybe all the time, should you be washing that, sanitizing it if you're reusing that? So I just think it would be interesting to go from an educational perspective, which could indeed also include the island of plastic bags is floating somewhere in the Pacific. I think there's a huge island out there of these things that can help people see various consequences of various options. That to me seems a good starting place. We could potentially, even when we have the leaf recycling, we might have people also bring their plastic bags or other bags for recycling, and then dispose of those appropriately. Maybe encourage scout troops to get involved in recycling, but it seems to me we focus on that piece and not on the other. I actually wrote to some big honcho of King Soopers in the Midwest, wherever the main company is, and raised the issue a couple of years ago, and I think that got them to go into having cloth bags for sale, at least at the King Soopers that I go to. For reuse and so forth. But anyway, I think education of whatever aspects that we think we can help people with, that help our environment and our city.
Any other comments? Coincidentally, while in D.C., I noticed a little sign on one of the cash registers, and it said it was a bag fee. It was 5 cents for a bag. If you brought your own bag, great. If you didn't, you'd like a bag, it's 5 cents, and it's going to the river. So I just Googled it, and it's interesting, and that since from 2009, the monthly average of bags, plastic bags handed out, went from 22.5 million to just 3 million in January. So they've reduced in 3 years from 22.5 million to 3 million, which was their intent. And the reason for it is the Anacostia River, and apparently they have quite a substantial problem with pollution and debris and trash. Also, it's a much more major metropolitan city than Littleton is. And to be, literally to give away that many bags in a month, 22.5 million a month, that is a lot of shopping. But the tax generated $150,000. So it proves that it's definitely not a money maker. And they were also at the 5 cents. But a couple of things that struck me from that and then hearing tonight is that while the 5 cents was not enough for me to hurt the pocketbook, what it did when she asked me if I wanted a bag and I saw that sign, and it made me think, I don't need a bag. I can carry this up to my room without a bag. So I didn't get the bag, but it wasn't because I was saving 5 cents. But it's that education thing Peggy's talking about. But it's at the point of purchase that the education happened. Are we, in some ways, not already doing that with the availability of the other bags and those types of things? More and more and more and more of these merchants are carrying these, and they've got them, and you get them almost free anywhere you go, any event you go to. These are, I probably have 30 of them at home. And along with those 30 that I always forget to take to the grocery store, I have a big, huge collection of plastic bags that I also keep forgetting to take to the grocery store because they will recycle them for you. So,
We're not going to see you on the hoarder show, are we?
no. So I guess first of all, I don't, Mike, I love your research on this, but I also noticed that we have a lot of, it's mostly mountain towns and Boulder. And that, enough said. But we're not seeing suburbia embracing this. And the other thing is we don't have retailers like a Walmart. We don't have a Target. We don't have these huge bag users, these huge volume shopping things. So a lot of the bags that we see are probably not even ones we would be able to control or manage by this. Our grocery stores, I think, are the biggest users of these types of bags. Peggy started going down a route that I thought was interesting, and then I thought, what if we did something a little bit more rewarding instead of punitive, which Jerry's kind of the mind that it's a fee, it's a tax, it's something that you're going to make me pay that I wouldn't have had to pay before. What if we rewarded for recycling, rewarded for bringing them back? Because the problem isn't that I go to the grocery store and I use plastic bags and I go home and I put them in a container to bring back to the grocery store to recycle. The problem is those bags getting out and the trash, and then the trash blows and then the bags go. That's really where the bag problem starts. So if there was a reward program for recycling, for bringing them back, and I don't know what that is, I don't know what that is, or if it is just an educational thing. We will recycle these. Because I'll tell you who won't is your trash pickup won't. Waste Management won't do it, Eagle won't do it, they won't do it. The only places I've seen doing it are the Target and the grocery stores, because there's a tricky recycle product. So it's not, so it is a specialized thing. Maybe we look at something like that that would accomplish a goal and
We
not.
actually have 2 grade schools that will collect them, too.
Seeing that might be.
And they get a feedback.
That's a great idea too. Try the schools.
There are, the precedent for that, I don't know if it would work on plastic bags but a number of states do the deposits on pop cans. So when you buy a 6-pack of your favorite soft drink, you pay 5 or 10 cents a can in addition to, and then when you bring the cans back, you get your money back.
Oh, well.
But what ends up happening is that enough people pitch them off the side of the road or something that you get kids will run around all summer long picking these things up, dragging them back to the grocery stores and getting a chunk of change, and then you don't see the cans on the side of the road. I mean, I've always been amazed. Colorado's never done that, but whatever. But I don't know if you could do a deposit on plastic bags, penny a bag or something, and then bring back 100 of them and you get, $1. I don't know if it's worth it.
Yeah, I don't.
Well, it ends up being a headache, but yeah.
Well, Peggy.
People actually fabricate things with plastic bags. Might be interesting during Western Welcome Week to have a contest for creative things made with plastic bags, just to change the psyche. People weave things. It's like a rag rug. They can make a rug out of plastic bags. So, and I'm trying to remember some other things that I've seen made with them. So the idea would be to get people into thinking of them other than throwaway items. Again, the way I deal with my garbage, my bags, when I go to the store, as soon as I come in and unload stuff, if I happen to have a plastic bag in what I did because of some goopy thing I bought, I just put them all where I'm going to take my bags when I go out to the car, put them in the car so they're in the car, whenever I wind up going to the grocery store. But, of course, it makes it a bit of a messy car sometimes. But trying to think of some creative ways to get people, just as at the cash register, you were prompted, Debbie, but in other ways to think about plastic bags in a different way. So I still go back also to, let's do an educational piece.
I guess what it comes down to is this something that we want to move forward, or in what form or fashion? I think we've done, I think staff and Bruce have both done ample research on this. Mike, is there anybody out there who's doing kind of a reverse reward on this?
Not that I've come across, but granted, I also wasn't looking for anything like that. So it's something we could research.
We could, the only thing, I mean, it would really be the retailer that would be in charge of that, and I think that would have to be a choice issue. I don't think we need to tell them they need to do that. Jerry?
I think if we're talking about recycling, then let's talk about recycling. And if we're talking about littering, let's talk about littering. I think that to single it down to plastic bags does not, again, I think it's a feel-good measure. It's not an effective measure. I know when you go to REI, Peggy, and you go there, I think, too, they don't even give you a bag. They ask you if you want a bag, but it's not an automatic deal. And they do that because they're environmentally conscious. And we should promote recycling, not adding or considering a new tax. Michael.
Well, and I will say to your point on REI, every place that I went in D.C., every single one of them asked you, and I think that's part of the law that they passed. You have to be asked, do you want a bag? You are given a choice.
Also, my first thought is if we're going to model ourselves after D.C., then we're in trouble.
Well, we're not.
Okay, good.
But I think it was a fair example and a fair piece of information to share. Bruce?
I would certainly have no problem agreeing with some education and outreach kinds of initiatives, one of which I think to Jim's point would be that maybe getting airtime at Metro mayors for something like this to see if there is a regional solution. And maybe that's what it ends up being, is maybe there needs to be some sort of a model that the Metro mayors are willing to sort of say this is something we can all more or less live with, because it is a regional. I mean, the reason the mountain communities and people like Boulder would do it, or Fort Collins considered it, is they're more remote, and there aren't a lot of communities around them overtly. But certainly, if we're going to look at this as a broader recycling/littering problem, then it is a broader conversation that maybe is worth having with some of the other communities to see if there's a dialogue that everybody could agree to uniformly, which would be better than maybe the piecemeal approach. But in the interim, I think that's a constructive solution or a suggestion to at least get out there and start having some of these communications and reminding people to recycle, and reminding people to not litter, and as best you can without forcing somebody to do it or charging somebody to do it if we can't get there.
It might just be exactly that, just an improved messaging campaign, and I think that it's good in terms of not just the plastic bags, but there's a lot of water bottles and that whole plastic world that we're in, and a lot of stuff gets tossed out of cars still. If you can,
ends up in landfills or whatnot.
well, it ends up in the gutter, and then it ends up in the storm water, and then it ends up in the river, and so all of that stuff. And the other thing is we don't have to reinvent this, because the Greenway Foundation has done a ton of work on this, and so it may be something that we touch base with him on that, because he's done a lot of work, and he's been in here asking for help and money on that, so it may be. So, I don't know, Michael, is this something that you guys might want to take and look at a communication effort bring back some ideas on?
If you would like to direct us to look at education.
Is that where we're leaning on this, guys?
is where we're leading.
Well, that's
To
what-
direct,
That's what I said, and it could be doing something in conjunction as we talk with the retailers, and have some discussions with them on what can happen on that front. And it could be done, I don't know if a competition, if they're up for it, anything like that might be something of interest. But their participation in it, because that's where a lot of it stops. I mean, a retail outlet, carried everything out in my hands. So I was asked, and I said, don't need to kill the plastic tree. So, I think that's a possibility as we go through and discuss folks, and who knows, you can maybe have something in the Littleton report.
it could be fun, kind of to go off what you're to do, like an entire campaign amongst the retailers with some sort of identifier as that they use to say, hey, think twice before you put it in a bag, or maybe we could come up with something fun. I don't, just, yeah. Peggy?
So, I mean, we have some chain stores, of course, so that will be a little tricky, but we might try to get them to the various stores in Littleton, chain and otherwise, to think about part of a branding for Littleton in terms of, in Littleton, even the chain stores approach things differently, right? As in the conservation piece, they're not doling out 3 million plastic bags, but encouraging the reuse. But it's like a creative set in Littleton, if only in terms of having them have some signage in the store, even though they have to deal with the chain's general method of dealing with things.
Mike?
I was going to say, in a lot of the circumstances around these, or in their campaigns, they often develop some kind of a sticker saying, "Did you remember your bag, your reusable bag?"
Oh, yeah.
Or a sign that they put in the parking lot as you walk into the facility. So
Yeah.
there's all of those.
In 5 years, we can have a new sticker that says, did you remember to wash your bag?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think what we ought to, if council's okay with this, direct staff to put together, I think Michael's heard enough to come back with something at some point that looks like what we've just
For what, a
gone
recycling
through.
program? Is that what we're talking
Kind of an awareness, community outreach awareness program, and what that looks like, we'll see when it comes back. And then we can tweak it to death. Okay, thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
You're still up.
I'm still here.
Is it Bruce?
I just wanted to say thank you, though, as well, for having, it was a good discussion, and I think these aren't the easiest issues, and it isn't the easiest goal and objective to address, but I think looking at it creatively and in conjunction with the community values is great. And so I just wanted to say thank you for people having a good conversation.
Well, I think also, Bruce, you brought up the important subject over a year ago, and it did give all of us a chance
Good.
to do our own homework instead of bringing it up a month ago and then none of us getting a chance. So that was good.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it.
Jim?
And I'll just say one last thing, is that King Soopers used to have a sign on their door saying, "Did you remember your bag?" And I couldn't tell you how many times I walked back to my car to get my reusable bag because that sign was there. When they removed the sign, did I think to take it out of my car?
No.
Not until my cart was half full. And then I was trying to remember, can I leave the cart here safely and go out and get my bag?
I
So
know, I think
signs
they
do
ought to have an LED sign when you come into the parking lot. Yeah. That's because they had that whole Got Milk campaign that was so good. Okay, Mike. Oh, go ahead.
Ready to go?
Ready to go.
Next item on your agenda is the discussion on solar. We were also asked to bring this issue forward for a broader discussion. Really, we've got two issues I'll be talking about here. One is the solar energy potential for the city facilities, and the other is the city's interest in assisting residents in obtaining solar for their properties. First off, some background info. Incentives are really what got solar moving just a few years ago. Probably about 2008 or so was about the peak and slowly faded some as some of the incentives have gone away. The federal incentive still exists for a 30% tax credit for solar, and that exists through 2016. Excel, since we're in Excel territory, we have to play by their rules. They have incentives that vary depending on the solar system that's installed, whether it be residential or commercial, and they currently sit around 13 cents to 8 cents per watt, and it depends on a number of factors. And then also the city of Littleton, somewhat unique among other cities in the state, exempt all materials related to solar and wind generation from sales and use tax. So if a project were to come in, it would not be subject to sales and use tax. I spoke with city building official Jim Thielen recently, and he, just as an FYI to council, since January 1, 2011, there have been 25 solar installations in Littleton, and those are, that's both residential and business. So options for the city, if there's a desire to move forward. In the memo, I talked about these a little bit more. Since we, two issues important to note. Since we are a tax-exempt entity, we can't take advantage of a lot of those income tax credits that are available, some of those federal incentives. And then two, solar is a very expensive option, and oftentimes it's best to first look at energy efficiencies prior to moving into solar. I've dealt with this industry for a while, and it's a fairly commonplace thing, and it was a fairly common saying a few years ago, that you're supposed to eat your energy efficiency vegetables before you get your solar dessert. So, decent analogy for moving forward. If the city did care to move forward with...
Can I just mention, hold on to your day job, Mike?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's not my wording. That's,
That was a good one.
That was fairly often used by the governor's. Yeah, isn't it? It's a great one. Yeah, and so a few years ago, back in 2010, the city did commission Johnson Controls to move forward with a technical energy audit. That they came back with about $1.2 million for a recommendation for energy efficiency improvements at the city. Much of that went the recommendations were not implemented.
There was a huge...
It was a 15-year payback on that. Yeah. So.
Can I ask on that?
Sure.
We, as I recall, council said, let's proceed with as many of the things that we can do to save energy. So what, if anything, do we have that we can still do to become more energy efficient?
Well, some of the lighting improvements were made working with facility folks and with Charlie Gloston. Some of those recommendations have been put in place.
I mean, we
And there were
savings in the shop when they replaced
right.
lighting there.
And that was I understand that was the big replacement issue.
But
I don't have a ton of history on this, unfortunately.
are there not things, I mean, there are things, I know there are things we can still do.
Sure.
Peggy, we had about, I think, off the top, about $400,000 worth of projects this year tied into that were on that list. I don't remember what they are, boilers, some of the HVAC improvements, those kind of things. So what staff's been doing since that study is just looking it off as the budget has allowed as we go through. And we did bring Johnson Controls back to look at it, to update that this year. Ended up not just paying cash for it out of what council had appropriated for that 400 or whatever that dollar amount was.
I think there's still some low-hanging fruits that haven't been identified. For example, in the summer, when you go in the library...
Hey, you need that.
Oops, sorry. In the summer, when you go in the library with the south-facing windows, you about cook your brains out if you stay in that room that has that exposure. So I've been figuring out why we don't have some kind of sunscreen.
I have a good answer for that. Leave the room.
I do that. I'm not that silly, but when I'm reshelving books in there, I really notice
It gets so warm.
And so that seems to me a pretty big challenge on air conditioning there. In the winter, it's great because then you get the passive heat coming in. But I think there's some of those things. Now, I've been told women can see better in the dark than men, that it's got to do with how many rods and cones women have versus men. So I don't know. All I know is I seem to be able to see almost in the pitch dark. But
Well, we can lift more beers than women. So it's a trade-off.
apart from that, it seems to me that we have quite a few lights on in various places where I would just go and unscrew some lights, if nothing else, because do we need that much light? Now, if we do, fine, but all those things kind of add up. So, not that I'm not wanting us to conserve in other ways, but I'm trying to rephrase this policy question in terms of things that we can do on a broader scale for all the energy efficiency.
Bruce?
So I went through the Johnson stuff in depth on behalf of council in 2010. As far as the cash flow economics were concerned, the problem wasn't, they did a good job of identifying the opportunities. But the deal was, they were interested in funding it, and the program had more to do with providing financing for municipalities who didn't have the resources to do projects that needed to be done, which basically passed all the economic value to Johnson, in exchange for you getting something done. And hence, this was where we had 15-year paybacks on lighting retrofits, which was completely insane. Made no sense at all. So I think we have, what I think they have been doing is what you guys indicated was yeah, they have been going through and doing lighting retrofits. They didn't seem to make a lot of sense to do the boilers, because even if we did it ourselves, yeah, you'd save energy, but the energy savings, especially with gas prices coming so far down in terms of the cost of fuel, is it was going to take forever to pay them back. And so it didn't seem like there was a lot of economic advantage to doing it, even if we fronted the money, which we didn't want to do.
We replaced boilers, but we did it because they were dying.
Well, and that's a different issue. If you've got a situation where you've got a dead boiler, then yeah, you don't have a choice. But at the time, I thought we were looking at it, I didn't get the impression they were that close to being end of life. But be that as it may, the Johnson thing, I think it's pretty clear where the laundry list of projects lies, and then it's just a matter of internally they had sort of made the decision to do them year by year as funding allowed, because the financing cost was outrageous when it came to using third-party money. So that's just the history of the thing.
Sure. And so, back to discussion on solar. The moving forward with the options for the city to consider solar, you've got a few options, primarily being, one, the outright purchase of a solar array for use in the city. Big expense, long payoff. You qualify for Excel rebates, but not the federal tax incentives. Then there's the third-party financing option, which is what most communities go forward with. You have the power purchase agreement, which is where you work with a provider to site an array on your property. You then, in turn, contract with them to purchase the power that's generated from that array, and they charge you a fee that's generally a little less than what the utility companies charge you. And then there's the lease or lease-to-own option, which is where you work with a developer to site an array on your property. You pay for it incrementally through an additional charge on your utility bill each month, or additional charge to the entity that put it on there for you. And in some instances, it is a straight lease. You rent the array. In other instances, it's a lease to own, so you own it in generally 20 years time frame. And then the options for the solar option for residential. Really, the only option here right now in this realm is the development of a community solar garden. Back in 2010, the state legislature put in place a law that allows for community solar gardens to occur. This is basically where, in most instances, a local government works with a solar hosting or development company to site an array somewhere, and then it basically works on more or less a homeowners association model where you buy into the array, you own panels in the array, and you pay for those panels, and then you pay a small maintenance fee annually for maintenance and upkeep of the entire solar array. And then you benefit whether you're a renter, a condo owner, a homeowner where the orientation of your property doesn't exist, maybe you have a shady lot where you couldn't have solar. And so it provides for basically as if solar were on your property. It's net metered. You can obtain all the various incentives that are out there and whatnot. And it's still grid tied, net metered, whatnot. Since we are in Excel territory, though, we have to, as I mentioned earlier, play by their rules. Excel Energy right now is offering, there are two options for solar arrays. Annually, they put out about 4 megawatts worth of potential solar array space in their large program. Last year, they did 4, and they split it into, it's 8 megawatts annually. They split it 4 and 4, and when they did make the offering, they sold out. And mind you, this is the statewide Excel territory, so it's basically 2/3 of the state is covered by Excel Energy. They sold out in less than 30 minutes for that offering. And it was incredibly competitive, and just because you put together a project doesn't necessarily mean that you will be selected. So if we did decide to move forward, we could do something, work with, well, first we'd have to find the appropriate property, then work with a solar host or developer to move forward with something like that.
Bruce?
So the couple other things we did, again, a couple years ago, Phil Cortez and I looked at, well, let me back up. The whole thing with solar is really economies of scale. You definitely need somebody in the middle to be able to eat the tax credits, because that's a big part of the cash flow economic value of the thing. Now, that can certainly be a third-party provider. The thing we looked at a couple years ago as well was maybe doing an LLP structure where citizens could buy shares, and then they could get passed through the tax benefits, and make it truly community solar kind of thing. But it seemed to me at the time that the big issue wasn't that there was potential value, that it was economies of scale. So when we looked at doing stuff, the one we looked at was putting a solar array on the museum, which you can do, but it was sort of a lot of effort for some value. It wasn't clear that it was, it'd probably make a difference, and it was fine. But again, it was the kind of thing where the people who make out better are the guys that are providing the third-party capital. Initially, there were some, if we could have gotten a big enough array in place, the logic of doing purchased power contracts, we had the capacity. And we talked to, for example, Arapahoe Community College as well was the other one. And we had contacts over there to see if they were interested, because they've got a pretty big load. So, I mean, if you did a big enough array and you could theoretically, well, we'll talk about that in a minute, but you could get the city center, you could theoretically get the sewer plant, because it's a pretty stable load at a pretty high level. You could do ACC. There are obviously other large entities, CenturyLink and some of these people who might have an interest. Now you've got enough capacity to make it work. The problem we had 2 years ago was we didn't have the bandwidth internally to go figure it out, because Excel was reasonably impenetrable. I talked to them at CML about this kind of stuff one year, and their approach was sort of, it was a lot of PR, which is great. But what we didn't have was somebody who could actually go run the economics and figure out how it all made sense, given the tax credits, given the rebates, given the grants, given the purchase power contracts, and so forth and so on. Now, I don't know if council has an appetite or staff has an interest. I really view, though, this thing as being, again, another one of these things that's part and parcel of our, it's not only sustainable, but it's economic development, because it sends the marketing and the branding message to the community that we're out there in terms of Littleton being at the forefront of quality of life, which includes some of these kinds of issues. So if we could do this, if there were cash flow economics that were supportive, positive, I mean, I don't know if they have to be massively positive, but even if they were positive and we could save money versus Excel, regular power generation, you've got something you can really talk about as far as the community's brand image, which was, again, another big attribute of this, notwithstanding it isn't all that quantifiable. So that was the original theory behind this and why I think it sort of keeps bouncing back in. Notwithstanding, I know we looked at it a couple years ago, and people said they didn't want to do it then, but now we had the sustainability goal, so it seemed like it was at least worth revisiting.
And if I can address some of those points, where I came from in Rifle, before I came to Littleton, we had 2 power purchase agreements that we had gone forward with. One was for about 2.3 megawatts, and then another one that we're moving forward that would have brought another 700,000 online. With those, we worked with Sun Edison on one and Martifer Solar with another one.
Okay.
And they had financing partners in there as well. And what we found with those was, if you went through the analysis, you about break even. You maybe pay a little less for your initial electricity, but there's other costs that are involved in there that result in you about breaking even. But for the council there, it was the issue of sustainability, marketing the community as a solar-friendly community and whatnot. So that's kind of why they went forward with it. They also had worked with the Community Energy Collective, which is a community solar provider, and they had installed a large 700 kilowatt community solar array that was available for Holy Cross customers. Holy Cross is an REA under entirely different guidelines than Xcel Energy, but if you do move into the community solar realm, there are experienced companies that know the process, were involved in the rulemaking at the PUC, and are knowledgeable on that competitive process that Xcel Energy has. And I would suggest if there is an interest in moving forward with community solar, that we engage one of those companies who are knowledgeable on it.
Phil?
Just to expand it, now that there's a community that's going up in Denver using thermal, would be not to just limit it to necessarily a solar generation. Just what Bruce was saying, it could be any type of environmentally friendlier power generation. So I'll leave it with that, because there may be some opportunities as we look for something else that might be a little bit different than solar, which in its construction approach actually uses a lot of not good stuff. And then you have the waste disposal at the far end, so to expand it, to consider others.
To jump in, but there's actually, we talked to the guys in South Park, and I think Beckman and I were in that meeting, but there's actually one of the buildings down there, I don't remember which one it is, but it's one of the office buildings that's been on geothermal heat for a number of years, and apparently has saved a substantial amount of money from drilling wells and so forth and so on. So I mean, yeah, absolutely, it doesn't have to be solar, but there's other alternatives. That was just one that we sort of looked at, but again, from all the right reasons, it makes some sense I think it makes some sense to investigate these things and put the economics on the table.
Littleton does allow geothermal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Geothermal doesn't really work in the concept of what we're talking about on the solar.
Purchase power, no.
But it certainly is something and it's primarily used on a greenfield real development because it's hard to retrofit. But if you have to scrape off on something, you certainly can.
It does require some space as well, because you have to have a place to put the geothermal.
Parking lots, I think.
Yeah, parking lots, ponds work well.
Jim?
At the Municipal League Conference in June, I'm going to be moderating a session on Colorado Solar Energy Association. And I attended one of their conferences a couple of months ago in Westminster and sat next to some people from Rifle and from that part of the state up there. They talked about how successful they thought their power purchase agreements had been, and I think that that might be something we at least ought to have investigated and come back to us and see what kind of results would come from it.
Peggy, did you?
Yeah, so, I mean, I support that too. I still think we need to rephrase the issue, not just for the city, the government, but for the citizens. So that, for example,
Do you have your mic on?
yeah, I'm not talking loud enough. Gee, sorry.
Just pull it closer.
I'll do that. Citywide savings, not just for the city, but also for the citizens. We've got at least two objectives in our goals and objectives: improving housing stock and economic development, which was also mentioned, and probably some others relate. So if we want to improve housing stock, one way to do it is to encourage people to invest in making their houses more energy efficient and water efficient. And I attended, I think it was a CML lunch, one of those lunch topic meetings. They had somebody from Boulder and a couple of other communities talk about initiatives that they had in their communities to get people to upgrade the insulation in their walls, in their attic, or wherever they could put it, in their crawl space if they have one of those, upgrading their furnace or boiler, making them more efficient, installing the low-flow toilets and the faucets and whatever. And Boulder, I think, has a way that they allot points for each of various things. And then when people get so many points, I think they get a credit on their property tax or on some other assessment that they have. So they're going to get a payback that way, but also in the savings by being more energy efficient. And we already have some things that are credits for people for solar installations. So it seems to me we ought to look broader while we also model trying to make the city buildings more efficient as we can. And since we can't so easily just plop the solar someplace or other, pursuing that option too. But since building season is coming upon us, rehab season, home improvement season is coming on us quickly, I would really like us to consider doing this other piece. And I can argue for this because we've done just about every darn thing we can for our house, so I would not benefit from this. But I know the cost savings that people experience when they do these various things. So it's a great way to try to get, I think, our housing stock improved while also getting benefits to the users.
Any other comments? Jim?
Just a little clarification. If we wanted to try to do a community solar garden, from what I understand, you say, Mike, that that's not going to be possible to do without Excel's permission to do so, and that's very hard to get.
Correct. That's my understanding, is because we're in Excel territory, we have to work through Excel, and we're not a municipal power provider, municipal utility. Some places are. So it's different, like Colorado Springs or Fort Collins, they're working under a municipal utility, and therefore it's a little bit easier for them to negotiate that. Here, we're with Excel Energy, and they're regulated by the PUC, and the PUC and Excel work to set those, and the legislature work to set the guidelines for community solar.
Because that certainly would be a lot of benefit to homeowners in the city if we could participate in that and create our own community solar garden someplace, either in the city or in conjunction with surrounding communities.
Mm-hmm. And if there's a desire to look into that, I talked to Charlie on that. He doubted, his initial assessment was that that there was anything within the city of Littleton's property that something like this might work on. However, there were other properties that may be under the control of other entities, be it RTD, South Suburban, the city of Inglewood, that may work, and we could engage them in a discussion on this.
Phil?
And just, I'd be willing to at least look at entertaining sales and use tax forgiveness for some.
You need to be heard.
Yes, I would be willing to entertain a sales and use tax forgiveness or exemption for.
Call it a fee.
No, this is the other way. This is a negative revenue. Okay, so for use of environmentally friendly power source ideas as we look at development and redevelopment.
We have them already for, as I said, solar and wind generation. Talking to Jim Thielen, there is an interest in expanding that, so if that's my desire.
Anybody else?
At the very least, I would like us to do another waiver of permit fees for things that don't have to have major review by staff, the way we did a couple of years ago. Again, to encourage projects that help improve that.
That doesn't have anything to do with this.
Well, it does in terms of what Phil just said, in terms of the sales and use tax. If we want to try to give some incentives. So that's why I was piggybacking that, the incentive. So if that's not appropriate tonight, I would like us to put it on a study session agenda.
It may have a correlation, but it isn't something we've looked at yet. I mean, if we want to do something like that, I would suggest we have staff bring back more information on it, because
that's what I'm
we
asking.
did do it before, and I think that the environment and the climate at that point was different than it is now. So I think whatever we bring back, it needs to be able to justify doing that, because that's money for the city, and I know why we did it before, and I think we need to have fresh information for if we were going to make that decision again. Michael?
When you're done with this item, I'd like to, when you guys decide what you want to do on this, I want to respond to Councilman Coles in your comments, please.
Okay. So on this item, Mike, help me navigate. You've got a number of issues on here. Tell me, on the solar options,
Are you looking for recommendations?
what do you want from us?
Well, I think the initial, for the solar facilities, we could put out a request for information for companies who do PPAs and have them investigate. They basically come in and do an analysis of our existing energy bills and whether or not it would make sense in city facilities to move forward with some kind of a solar development of solar arrays on city facilities.
Okay. Council, is that something that you would like for Mike to spend any time on? My opinion is no. My opinion is that solar has the greatest benefit for the residential user. They get the greatest kickbacks for it. And we have looked at this before. We also did a study. We also had them come in and do an analysis. The payback is so long and it takes so forever. I would rather not spend time on that again. I think some of these other options may have a little more opportunity, but this, my feeling is no. Council, where are you guys at? Phil?
I agree with that, but the part that maybe could be carried forward from the city staff is for like South Metro housing options as they're looking at construction. I don't know whether they have some opportunity for something like that, since it is residential that they're very often looking at. But to be in a position to take that on.
Bruce?
I things change. I mean, we've looked at this stuff a couple years ago, and it's a different environment, it's a different landscape, there's different things going on. I think for them to, the residential agreed, South Metro Housing, or SHMO, as we refer to them.
That's just you.
Yeah,
All right,
it's just you. Thank you, Peggy.
Actually, I've heard Dan Burnham
Yeah, because
use
you
it.
started him.
Well, I'm happy to take that
Full
credit. But yeah, South Metro Housing Options, I think, is a great idea. I think residential, absolutely. But I think having a couple companies come in and look at the whole thing, it doesn't cost our staff, I wouldn't think, an inordinate amount of time, correct me if I'm making an erroneous assumption, to relook at something like an array that could power multiple sites. And frankly, I think we really should do it for the sewer plant, because God knows their cost structure is not getting any lower. It's one thing if you've just got air conditioning, heat, and light here, but they've got a boatload of power that's being used to run a lot of equipment, and I really would like to, I would really recommend we do it, in particular with respect to that entity, just to sort of figure out if there is any there.
They have good exposure, too.
Yeah, they certainly have the land to do it. Yeah, exactly.
I think the challenge before has been some of the landscape concerns from Englewood, and that would be the part of the discussion.
I think it goes back to the cost of doing it. The government's not getting the kickbacks, like the residential get the kickbacks, and the amount of time of the payback. If you want, I don't feel like the landscape has changed that much in a couple of years on this. Mike, I don't know if you have.
In my experience, the incentives have actually decreased. So,
But as the cost of the equipment
but
changed.
the cost of the equipment has also gone down. That's correct.
Michael.
The other thing is that one is talking about putting the solar at the physical location.
Correct.
The other is, if you turn it from the community solar garden, it doesn't matter where you put the array.
No, as long as it's within the
along
general vicinity.
along the system. So to some extent, I think you guys can, I would recommend that if you want to do anything, that we look more on the solar gardens. And you can either lose the word community or keep it, depending upon what you want, because you could build, I don't know what the kilowatt usage from the treatment plant is, but part of making it fiscally viable, say it's going to be on a Arapahoe County property somewhere, you build it to accommodate the draw from the treatment plant. I am sure Englewood is not going to support putting a solar array at the Englewood plant for a variety of reasons in talking to Gary. But that's not where it needs to be. Those days that's where solar gardens came from, is because you don't need it attached to your physical location. It's why you can buy wind energy that offsets it. You don't actually have a wind.
Some taper trees.
It can be anywhere.
Right.
Yeah, think of it as wet water and paper water. So I think to some extent you can separate these out, and the different views that you have can be accommodated by, if you want to do anything, directing us to look at solar gardens, and we can then incorporate the different buildings and looking at the total wattage necessary.
And Deb, I don't disagree with you on like the city center, and I knew the economics were thin on the museum, but I don't know that we've ever really looked at this issue economically, because when we tried to do it before, we just couldn't get the data. And it was really hard to get anybody who knew how to give us the numbers for what it was going to cost to build and operate the array relative to the discounts or the rebates from Excel and the tax credits and so forth and so on. And that's why I think, to Michael's point, that aspect of it is worth a look, because I'm not entirely sure we've really ever seen it. I know we have for this, and I wouldn't overtly disagree. I know the museum was not exactly a short payback.
Anybody else? Okay, then I guess bring back some information, just some more study on
Specifically
solar gardens.
Related to solar gardens.
You guys, just keep it there. Okay.
All right.
that it?
That's it. Michael's up next.
Trash.
Oh, yeah, Michael,
Ready?
where you wanted to address Peggy's.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, then. So we are coming back with the new I-code, and I don't know exactly when, but coming in April or early May with the new I-codes, and part of the the International Building Codes, apologize. And we're going to have a study session on it. I don't have a date for you right now, but we have been talking about, Peggy, to your question, what is currently in place, because a lot of what you did was actually an ordinance change and are still in place. And so we've been talking in some pretty general terms here. The building department also has some stats on what's actually occurring with those waivers and whether they've actually encouraged or not potentially encouraged, because I will tell you in general our thought is you're making the choice to improve your house. You're not going, oh, there's a waiver of a $50 permit, and that's what's getting you to do it. So there's a question of, are we actually encouraging, or are we losing money on that particular inspection or plan review? That aside, we will come back, and part of what we would be proposing is how to handle the incentives, because we're very cognizant of trying to get reinvestment into the community. You know, we've all been talking about that for a year plus now. So it will get placed on a study session, and we'll let you guys know when that happens.
Just give it to us early enough that we have a chance to go through it beforehand.
Yeah, well, you've been through, I believe, I-code amendments with Jim Thielen, and in my discussion with him, we have a fairly view. He does an overview of what has changed and then the local amendments. So it should be a fairly short, I mean, the big discussion over the last couple of years has been sprinkling of residential. And in my discussion with him, there are not many other substantive items such as that that'll come forward. But yes, your point is well heard there.
I was going to comment on the permit fees and city inspections and stuff like that. I've always considered them to be good, because we've done a couple additions at our house. We've had a large shed put at our house, a 12 by 24 type thing that required a permit and city inspection. We just had 42 panels put on top of our house. I always liked the idea that the city is coming by to make sure that things were done properly. And they have, in fact, found things where the contractors had to go back and do something better. Even with my shed, they were able to find that it wasn't anchored properly, so they were able to do that. So for me, the permits and inspection fees have been worth every penny. I knew one guy that thought he was saving money by not doing that. Turned out that they had to redo everything. So.
Well, if I'm remembering, we had just a short period that we waived those fees, and then the work had to be done by a certain time. So I'm not wanting us to go in the hole, but as I recall, even though that was during the recession, a major part of the recession, we thought that really did get some good work going. It was an economic incentive and to give some people some work, not huge amount, but some. And yes, maybe we both know the same person that was really grateful that our inspectors came in and made somebody redo something because it wasn't done right. So we've got great inspectors.
The way I've seen the waiving fees and things, because one of our the major work that we did at our house during the recession, we didn't do it because the city had all kinds of incentives going. We just did it because it was time for us. And I think that generally is people that are going to get something done, they have a time calendar that they're working with. They're not going to do it like, hey, look, we can save $500 finally. So I think those incentives benefit people who use it at that time, but I don't think there's a lot of folks that do things just because of that one incentive. Even the panels we just had installed, we didn't do it because there's incentives out there. We did it because it makes sense for us to do it at this time. It was kind of like when they did the car deal, the payback thing a while back. There were just it did encourage a lot of people to send in their, get rid of their cars, but there were a lot of people that were buying cars anyway that took advantage. So I'm not real crazy about those kind of incentives myself.
We'll be prepared to discuss it when we bring the codes forward.
On incentive type stuff?
Yeah, just what our thoughts and recommendations are.
Thank you.
Crash.
Okay. So, staff
Yeah, trash.
was asked to do some research on what could be done relative to trash trucks coming through the community. Primarily, I think this is both a quality of life question relative to the number of trash haulers that are coming through in trash trucks, and then obviously the wear and tear on municipal streets and the costs associated with heavy trucks coming through. And this is very much a issue of statewide concern, as you saw in the memo. And so I'm going to jump straight to the 4 options that are available to the City Council. And they start, there's no page numbers on this, but they're under the options section. There can be no regulation. You can ignore it, which to some extent is what we do. But we also fall into option B, which is the municipality adopting an ordinance regulating any trash hauler that operates within the city. And we primarily do that dealing with the trash pickup times. And we have notified, I've had a couple of you, as a side note, ask us to remind the trash haulers when they can pick up trash. So we have been contacting all the trash companies doing business within here. But you really don't have a lot of control within those regulations in terms of impacting quality of life or the wear and tear on the roads. I'm going to jump to D real quick and then come back to C. So D is similar to what Denver does, where the municipality actually does the trash collection. They're city employees, they're city vehicles, and we drive around and we collect the trash. That is one way that you can 100% ensure that we are collecting the trash and we have control over those collection times. But realistically, assuming you don't want to go in that direction, the option C in there, which is at least one way to start to limit the number of vehicles that are essentially going into residential. And that is just for ease of discussion, you could break the city into quadrants, and then you could bid each of those 4 quadrants for a trash service delivery. And then that company gets that service. Several things play into this. One is you can only do this for single family. You cannot do it for multifamily or commercial, so very limited impact in some respects. And 2, you can't actually preclude any other company from coming in there and still providing that service. You can certainly create a disincentive by having the city do the billing, in which case everyone in a particular quadrant that lives in a single-family home is going to get a bill mailed to them, and they have to pay that bill regardless of whether they use that service or not. And so they're less likely to contract with another company. They certainly could if that's what they wanted to do. And so the state has obviously been lobbied over the years by the trash hauling companies because your hands are, in some respects, very much tied in what your options are. And so not real clear. I know there's the basic concern around the, as I said, quality of life and wear and tear on the vehicles, but I'm not clear that any of these really, at the end of the day, deal with either of those to any great degree. And certainly if we get into the billing and bidding process, there's more administrative costs associated to the city. And I'm not sure that citizens would want us to bill whether or not they use that particular service. You can have the company bill those who use them within that area, but then again, you're not creating any disincentive to use them because if they don't use me, I'm billing with Company A, and I'll just get billed through them. And so one of the things in the recommendation that we have is we might want to start with just trying to contact these, sit down with them, and see if there's ways that we can reduce the number of trips that come through. I'm guessing they're as efficient as they can be anyway because they want to reduce vehicles miles traveled too because they're paying for gas. But it doesn't mean that there's not areas for improvement. And so if there was an interest to do anything, it seemed like that would be the appropriate starting place, is just to sit down and talk to these trash collection companies.
Jerry.
One of the things I've heard about from a few folks around town is that the noise is more of a factor than anything. Then because there are multiple companies, they get the same noise early again the next day. Or so.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What are your
Quality
thoughts
of life.
on this?
Well, we do regulate time right now for collection, and so you could theoretically push that time up. So if it's 7 o'clock a.m., you can move it to 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. Obviously, there's ramifications from them in terms of their entire distribution area for it. But again, if, sitting down and talking to them and posing that question to them and saying, are there ways that we can work with you guys within the confines that we have to minimize quality of life impacts and wear and tear on the streets? I don't know. They could come back and say, thank you, no. But maybe there are some things that they're willing to do. Maybe there's another community that doesn't have a noise or collection time regulation. Hypothetically, if Inglewood didn't do it, but they were collecting here earlier, maybe they could flip it. I'm sure that's a heck of a lot harder than it took me for me to say it. But again, sitting down with them and saying, here's what our concerns are, starting there.
Bill?
And I would add at least one item. I'm certainly wear and tear on the streets. We have at least 4 services that come down our cul-de-sac on a weekly basis. So there has to be some efficiency that they can gain if they. And I don't know if they play in the sandbox well with each other. So you're going to learn that in having the conversations with them. But one of the things that if they had some level of efficiency and could have possibly as a trade-off, including recycling, curbside recycling, because not every, it's often offered at an extra cost, so that if we could find some way to include the curbside recycling, because most of them you don't have to sort it all, you just stick it in a bin separate from your garbage.
It still seems to be a separate truck, though.
Yes, it's a separate truck, I understand that, but if they were able to garner some efficiencies in that they have a higher concentration in a particular area, and maybe with the power of government convening, if they could find some ways to be efficient. To me, it doesn't matter the day of the week that it comes, but I've actually started to notice more of we have at least 4 that come on a weekly basis.
I'm not holding out any hope, just so you know, that these guys will come to the table necessarily. These guys are in it to make money, and they probably have this down to a science on how long it takes them. I mean, there's an extent the other option here is to talk to your neighbors, just as an example, and say, instead of us all picking different companies, why don't we all pick the same company, and you, in that evening of dinner and a bottle of wine, have just reduced 3 companies.
Yeah, the only reason is I know our neighborhood just isn't the only one.
No, I know, but that's the other option is through the neighborhood outreach piece and getting the neighborhoods to decide that they're going to go with the single.
That was an agenda for our HOA.
Yes.
Which is now.
We did with
That has another.
So.
Eddie?
So I heard presentation on this at CML, 5-6 months ago? Did I tell you about this, Michael? Somewhere back there.
We've been talking about it for a while, yes.
But I think my street, I live on a little bitty street, a little block, but still through. I think we have 5 trucks, which means that 5 times a week, those heavy trucks are coming down the street. So now my street, and this is not a selfish thing, this was the biggest thing people complained about to me when I campaigned in 2011. I didn't raise the issue. It was the first thing came out of their mouths. The streets are marbled. Some of them are cracked pretty significantly, and it's not going to get, a lot of them won't get repaid for a good while because we have limited money.
There's no discussion on the impacts.
No,
What we're
but
presenting is what your options are.
I know, but I'm just saying that. That's a huge, I need to at least make my point.
Okay, sorry.
That's a huge curbside appeal or repeal, repellent, to see the streets the way that they are because of that effect. So it's an important kind of issue for that. But And then you already mentioned, the waking people up or whatever's happening, et cetera. So it does not seem to me to be very efficient, but at CML, I think there were 3 different cities that talked about what they were doing. And the one, I think, was Pueblo, I think that's who I mentioned to you, had, of course, they're much bigger, had 26 districts. They bid them out, and then they allowed the companies to swap around in case they got different pieces that made it less efficient for gas and whatever. They could just swap them around so they still got the same number of districts that they won the bids on. So it seems to me to make sense to do something like this. And some companies do have the 2 trucks, and some only have 1, whatever. So I do see this as a significant effort to reduce the wear and tear and improve the long-term economic viability of the city. And the appeal, again, the curb appeal for selling houses, for attracting people, there's a whole package involved. So.
Jim? then Bruce.
I really don't want to play one-upsmanship. I lived on a minor collector street previously, had 7 trucks come down there. But because it was a minor collector street, it did have probably heavier paving than what Peggy's residential street would have. So, but it would create the grooves in there. Now where I live, there are 9 homeowners associations in the complex. Each one of them can make its own decision about who they want to have pick up trash. And they have had joint meetings trying to determine if they can all agree on a single trash company, and they cannot even do that. The thing I would be most interested in is perhaps a licensing for all trash companies that operate in the city. And if we could require them to identify the areas they serve, then maybe we would have a reason for a meeting of saying, you know, look at this area. You've got 7 trucks coming down the street, or 5 trucks, or 4 trucks, whatever it happens to be. Can't you guys decide that you want to trade some areas so that your trucks are more efficiently run? They get better utilization of the gas that they're using, that sort of thing. But it would give them a reason for doing that if we have that kind of information. I don't think they share information with each other at all. So the only way they're going to be able to get it is if we're going to require some sort of information gathering from the trash companies.
Bruce and then Jerry.
Yeah, I was sort of going down the same path as on the licensing, but for a different reason, because, I mean, what you said here was it can require each trash hauling company to obtain a license, which we have the right to do now, and hypothetically, I don't know, what do we say, there's 25,000 residences or some such number in the...
We're only talking about single family, so I couldn't tell you.
All right, say,
It's
well,
like
so we
10.
got...
Yeah,
I think it's about 10,000.
Yeah, okay, so we got, 40, 50% of our apartments. So say, all right, say 10,000, and say it's not a ton of money is the issue. Well, I guess the question ends up being is if we charged a license, if we required them to obtain a license, could a component of the license be a charge regarded to road and street depreciation? I don't know what that would look like. I don't know how much that would increase residential trash bills. On the other hand, nobody wants to pay it, but on the other hand, and I don't want to pay it, but we all understand we've got an issue with regard to road infrastructure, which isn't getting any better. It isn't, there's some element of depreciation that's occurring as a result of these things, as Peggy said, coming down your street 5 times a week. I don't know what would be I don't know if that's doable. I don't know if that's feasible. I don't know if other communities do it, or if we should or shouldn't do it, but it seems like it'd be potentially a source of revenue that could be dedicated to road maintenance and repair, and by virtue of the fact that it's pretty clear cause and effect.
We can take a look at that.
Jerry?
And in our neighborhood, Aberdeen Village, we did get the neighbors together and got proposals from various companies, and many of us went with one company, some didn't. Some ended up not liking the company, others joined it later. But it really boils down to choice. And if we're going to try to, it sounds like government's going to try to run the trash companies, Jim, and I don't think we should try to do that. I think it is a matter of choice. Trash companies can run themselves better than we do. They're looking for efficiencies already. I think if we try to make it better, I think one thing's for sure, we can make it worse. But I really think it needs to be just choice of people out there. If they don't like the company, they have a choice to go somewhere else, and they can, as even on your cul-de-sac, I presume, you can get with your neighbors and say, hey, why don't we all just try to use one company? Like, again, I know in my neighborhood, Bruce, I can only think of 3 companies that come through ours. And it happens on two different days.
Yeah,
but again, it's because of our neighbors getting together and making that happen as a neighborhood.
Yeah.
We didn't need associations to do it. We just did it. Again, I like just, kind of like the Nike thing, just do it type thing. Instead of talking about it, we just did it. We didn't need the government or anybody else to come and say, hey, why don't you guys do this? We can make it better for you. We just did it.
I just want to comment on Councilman Taylor's comment. These are, and it ties in with Councilman Valdez's, they can't trade the area because Jerry chose that company. So he can still continue to choose that company, and they don't get to trade with me because they're in here. When I said I think they're being efficient, I meant for their service delivery area. So waste management probably is as efficient as they can be for those that they serve. If you bid it out in those different areas, again, Jerry can continue to, as I said earlier, he can, and you give it to Trash Collection A company, he can still use waste management, and you still have that truck coming through there. And they may have 2 trucks coming through there. I mean, this really is something that, to Jerry's comment, that the citizens can change by getting together as neighbors. They may not be able to, on Jim's example, where he was on a thoroughfare, because they're still driving by his house, but anyone who's in a small street can go knock on their neighbor's door. And part of why I'm saying that is because you are very limited in your authority, because not impacting commercial and resident and multifamilies will eliminate a lot of the areas of the community, as well as knowing that I can still choose, even if you say you're going to bid it out, I can still choose to have that company. I don't know what the citizens' response are going to be for that. There may be some areas that works very well on because everybody says, okay, it's now going to be waste management. I don't know how people are in love with their trash companies, I guess is the bottom line point, if they're wedded to them or not. So,
And Jerry doesn't use Waste Management, which is a fine company. We use Pro Disposal.
I'm sorry. Okay, sorry. Thank you. That was the only company I could think of. I'm not trying to promote them, trust me. Which, again, gets back to having a discussion with them and seeing what can or can't be done.
Well,
Peggy?
yeah, I do want to comment. It's not, if you live in a cul-de-sac, that's pretty easy to get those folks together. If you live Aberdeen Village, because of the way that's laid out, that might be easier. I live on a street that's a little bit tricky, but some trucks drive on the street from some other place to get to here. It's not necessarily they pick up anything on that street. It's just because of the weirdness of the streets there. So it's not quite as easy to just do certain things.
If it was easy, people would have taken care of it and the conversation wouldn't be. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you have very limited authority. And even if you exert that authority through bidding it, you still haven't necessarily accomplished. I mean, that's where, I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but that's where it seems like I still can pick that company I want even if you bid it. And when you tie that in with not impacting multifamily and commercial, I'm in that same scenario. My street, I don't know how many go down my street, and we're across through for others as well. So it's one of those,
But
challenges.
the folks at the CML presentation talked about, at least most of the folks that those cities were dealing with, were looking for a really good price. And that was the main driver of the reduction in price by the volume that given companies got by mainly representing these various districts, each of the various districts. And so, that's a big driver, but, it's for discussion. And maybe if people watching and they want to contact us and say something, come and speak, they can do that. So,
Find out if they're getting the best deal at their trash company.
I don't support doing anything on this. Our streets are in various stages of disrepair for a litany of reasons, most of which is that we haven't been keeping up with the needs because of the budget. The school buses that tear through my neighborhood, 3 of them, and I live in a very small neighborhood, they make, I don't know what the weight of all of these things are and different, but that's impact these FedEx trucks, the UPS trucks, buses, city buses, all of that is adding impact to these. The trash haulers, they add impact to it too, but I did that exact same thing in my neighborhood, and we kind of went together and said to the folks, if we bring 10 folks to you, you used to have 4 of them, we're adding 6 to it, will you give us a cut, will you give us a little break? They give us a little break, they come in, they pick up all our trash, they go away. 2 days later, another one comes through and picks up other people's trash, and 3 days later, someone else comes through and picks up the other folks' trash. That's life when you don't live in Denver. But I'm not willing to pay more because the city wants to license or cause a fee. The fee we charge would be so astronomical to be able to go in there and do what we want to do to the roads. They're the roads. We got heavy trucks that drive on the roads. And it's just the way it is. We have to keep the roads in as good a repair as we can. But I don't think the trash trucks are doing all the damage. And I quite honestly don't know that, I personally don't want to, I have no interest in pursuing this item. But, council, do you guys want staff to bring back anything on this regarding a conversation with multiple trash companies? And I feel, quite honestly, at this, that is an effort in futility, having dealt with a number of the businesses in town that have had trash concerns, particularly Aspen Grove, and talked to Margie on numerous occasions about her challenges dealing with these guys. They are not, they're more a CDOT railroad type of mentality. So, what do we bring into the table? They're running a business. It's free enterprise. I call them up. I'm going to hire you for your service. They come. They take my trash. It goes away. Good. So, anyway, that's my 2 cents. Where do you want to go with this, Jim?
Well, whenever I talked about doing a licensing, I wasn't talking about a licensing fee. Bruce did.
Yeah.
But I didn't.
Right.
Because my interest in that is knowing how many companies we have got in the city who's even operating. We don't even know that. We don't know if we've got 15 companies or 5. And that's just a piece of knowledge that I think the city ought to know.
I think that would be, I don't know how you would find that out, but, council, where do you want to go with this?
The next item.
well, I already made my point, so.
I'm ready to move on, let this one go away.
Bruce?
Well, I kind of think at the end of the day, you're probably right. I don't know. The reality, Jim, probably is we can figure out by how many trash haulers there are probably by looking at the yellow pages. I mean, they're probably all used, whoever's out there is probably being served.
There's not that many, quite honestly.
Nah, there really aren't. There's 5 or 6 as far as I can tell. And
That serve this area,
You got
too.
9,
Some of
at
them
least.
don't even serve this area.
You have 7? You have 5.
But, I don't think you're going to, the license issue, pretty clearly we were going to charge $100 per customer to help with the roads. It was, while I agree with you, and I think there's many causes for the roads degrading, not the least of which is the age of a lot of the infrastructure, we're still stuck at some point with more roads to repair than resources to repair them. And even if we got a little bit of income out of this process, I don't know that it would be overtly a bad thing, because there is theoretically some cause and effect. I'll defer to the rest. I mean, if people don't want to go there, I understand why. If there's an interest in looking at what a fee might be, I certainly would be interested in that, but it's not a hill to die on either.
Phil?
Okay, moving on. If we have the opportunity where we're talking with some folks, if we have the opportunity where we're talking with some folks and can find out some information, that would be great, but I would make it a special one.
Okay, Michael, you good?
You good?
Okay. Next item, 1E. Oh, jeez.
How high did you jump?
Can't.
Is that your notes?
Yes. Sorry.
It's all right. Thank you, Mayor, Council. Back with you to discuss a legislative policy statement for the city. In your packets, there's a draft that I prepared. Generally, policy statements developed by a city to provide guidance to both the staff and the legislators that represent the city. It's not something that necessarily will take control or take away control of the council. It's something that, as I said, provides guidance and allows the staff to deal with issues of concern that may pop up in the legislature where there's not time for council to react accordingly. So it provides that guidance that's generally needed. The draft policy statement was one that was developed after reviewing a number of other policy statements from communities up and down the Front Range, and as well as the Colorado Municipal Leagues. It covers a few very broad topics, enough to get us some general guidance, as well as notes that there's other issues that may be covered on a case-by-case basis. The vast majority of cities deal with their policy statements in this manner, kind of more of a broad brush approach. There are a few communities that get much more specific down to various issues, and their policy statements become 30 pages long and behemoths that no one reads anyway. So that's why I think it's best generally to keep it brief and to keep it short. When I used to lobby the state legislature, we always said a page or two maximum, and that's what this is. We're trying to keep this down so it's readable but still conveys the issue in the message that the city has. So if council approves this or has any comments, I'd be happy to take those now, but if there's a desire to move forward with this, we can bring this before you at a regular meeting to confirm.
Can you just clarify for me?
Sure.
Exactly what will the use be?
Well, in instances, when you meet with legislators, I think in
Okay.
August, there's a meeting with legislators.
Correct.
This is a time when you can discuss these issues with those legislators prior to their moving forward with the development of bills, if hopefully they hadn't already done so, as well as just a discussion item to say, look, when you consider issues of concern that will affect Littleton, these are some of the things that we want you to consider.
Okay.
Additionally, in instances where there is a bill in the legislature and there's not time, or it's fairly obvious what our position would be, this gives us that guidance to go ahead and do something on that bill.
Okay. Before we open it up for questions and discussion, I really just want to thank you, Mike. I really love your experience with this and your lobbying experience and bringing this stuff to the forefront. I think this year we're seeing in this session some of the things that these folks are dealing with that have such direct and massive impact on the city. And there have been years where there has been less. There's been some, but it hasn't been as bad. And then there's been some where it almost has been non-existent for us. But to have your expertise and to have you kind of direct us to how to get in front of this, and because I think it's just been the last few years that we've been meeting with the legislators anyway, bringing them in and talking to them. So this is just great beneficial help. So, council questions, Bruce?
Yeah, I think it's good too. But I would respectfully request you guys either add a paragraph or highlight in here, because there's places you could do it, for example, state mandates and so forth and so on. The wastewater treatment plan, and in particular, the nutrients issue, which is,
We had $5 on whether you were going to say the word nutrients.
just where were the odds going?
They were slim because it was pretty well guaranteed.
And that's one of those issues where it's fairly prominent, and it's acknowledged that it's a mandate coming down from the feds, passing through the state. But happy to...
That issue, but all the issues related, because they're all, as I said, it could fit under state mandates, it could fit under, I don't know, what else did you have? You had, I don't know, local control, it could fit under environmental, I think you had some stuff in here on that.
There's a few that are fairly broad catch-all.
Yeah, but I'd rather,
If you'd like nutrients highlighted.
well,
we could call
wastewater treatment plant issues, specifically nutrients in capital letters, because I'm
It may even be something, Bruce, if we go a little broader, because we've got that whole coming down the pipe, the stormwater issue. And it could be...
I agree.
It could kind of encompass all of that.
I think it should.
Okay.
I think, if you want to keep it on 2 pages, that's fine, but I'd love to see you guys get something in there that calls that stuff out specifically.
You'll be pleased to know that Councilman Beckman, who is at the National League of Cities, that's why he's not here this evening, I believe, has been talking to our congressional staff.
He went to the Capitol.
Excellent. Good.
Go there and speak on that issue.
Very good.
Okay, great. Jim, then Phil, then Peggy.
When I read through this, I thought this is just innocuous enough that we can get by with it without many changes.
Yeah, it's well written.
Yeah, I thought it was a high enough level that it provides a lot of coverage. The one thing I asked myself, which is, it talks about advocacy, and there's a lot of different ways that advocacy can happen. One is the Wastewater Coalition. You have the Colorado Municipal League. We have kind of a side bet with the chamber. So there's that. But then there's also we may take a position as a council for the city on something like that. And I'm not sure all of those different alternatives are addressed, whether we need to or not. That was one of my thoughts. And the question I have is, in your review of others, does it talk about different layers of how that advocacy can be evident?
We can, that could be addressed in kind of that opening paragraph if there's desire. You also have me. I still am a registered lobbyist and have been for the last 13 years.
And we have you plus our own direct relationship with legislatures, and that's included. And we have, Dr. Cog and the Metro Mayor's Caucus, and there's a number of venues that we have that in the past we haven't necessarily leveraged any or all of those. But I was thinking, something somewhat as innocuous as is what's there, but it might say that we do have
those partnerships that are available.
And items, relationships that we can leverage.
And was it Peggy next? Okay, Peggy.
Yeah, so I have several comments. I think this policy statement should, well, number one, thank you for this. Number two, I think it should be only until the end of 2013, so that when new council is elected, they revisit this, so they at least have a chance to give feedback.
if I may, the reason it's 2013, 2014 is that we'll be meeting with legislators in August.
No, and I
for
appreciate that.
their preparation in the
Right.
next year's session.
No, and I understood that, but I still think we need to
We
have,
have to be there.
yeah, yes. Then I do have some things, Jerry, bear with me. In my head, I like Mark Twain, the difference between lightning and a lightning bug is really important. So in the state and federal mandates at the end of the first paragraph, that paragraph, where it says require a shift in personnel resources, I would suggest personnel or financial resources or require additional residential fees. It's just clarifying.
Peggy, if you have edits that you want to discuss with Mike, then would you be okay with talking to him about them tomorrow?
Okay, well, let me make sure then that's what they are. 'cause
Okay,
I
if there's
can-
something substantive, and then Mike, if you would send us a revision after you, okay.
It's hard to tell whether some of this is substantive in your minds or not. But what I'll do then is give you a copy of what I did, and then you can indicate what I suggested. Because there's several things in my head that are important refinements. So if anybody wants to see what I'm going to send him, then you can look.
Sure, and I can always make the revision or note.
Yeah, and actually, well, I'll have
Okay.
to learn how to send this directly to you with the
Jim,
comments.
did you want, who was next? I forgot the order, I didn't write it down. Jerry, you go.
You can write me down as next.
Okay, Jerry.
So, no, Mike, thanks. If anything, it's a page too long, but I think you did a good job. Thanks.
That it?
That's it.
Cool? Okay, thank you, Mike.
Sure, thank you.
And we'll take a 5-minute break and come back at 8:40. just don't need to consider those in policy issues. Who's missing? Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, we are to the analysis of the city attorney's office. Michael?
Thank you, Mayor. So, as it states on January 29th, Council asked staff to look at operational efficiencies and essentially the pros and cons, if you will, of a firm attorney service versus a staff attorney, which is currently what we have. We have tried to have it be digestible and relatively short and sweet. I'm going to tell you that as we went through this, so process-wise, what we did was we talked to the attorney's office about scope and role. We talked to the administrative staff about need and their expectations around service delivery. And then we contacted other communities around the Front Range and other places to look at budgets and also in-house or staff attorney or firm attorney. And I'm going to jump primarily to the recommendation and then come back to some of the analysis piece. What you're doing at the end of the day is you're hiring an attorney. An attorney has a level of expertise. They have a personality. They have an approach to legal service. And that principal attorney through a firm is the one who would act as, in this case, as your city attorney, similar to having a staff city attorney. And so fundamentally, in order to have a lot of the questions that you all have asked answered, staff believes that the best way to do that is to interview some firm attorneys and see if there are folks that you like and ask them the questions. Now let's jump back to the analysis, because it is very hard, and Peggy and I have chatted a little bit about this, to just look at dollars and cents. The money aspect of it, you can do a comparative analysis of what a city attorney is paid either hourly or annually, and compare Inglewood and Littleton and Golden and pick your location. And you can look at total FTEs in an attorney's office. You can look at the FTE count of attorney, FTE to the size of the community, the number of FTEs within the organization. But ultimately what you don't get at is how those resources are being used and the level of expertise and what the legal issues are, if you will. And they obviously tend to trend. You could have a big push on urban renewal. You could have a lot of land use issues. You could have a lot of personnel issues. You could have a lot of contractual issues, et cetera, et cetera. And so talking with so it's hard to do a comparative analysis between the dollars that's out there. And so what we took was more of an approach of saying, what did we believe that the overall current legal need is in the organization? And that's where we're recommending that at this point, with the work that Kristen's doing and the work that Becky does along with the courts staff, that we believe a 0.5 attorney, city attorney, would be sufficient for our in-house needs that we have. We did identify, as is in the memo, that we really believe, as your administrative staff, that having someone in-house that we can walk down the hallway to, that is there on a regular basis or semi-regular basis, has value. Yes, we could email. Yes, we could do different things, but really having somebody in-house. We tried, and hopefully it comes across in the memo, that in either case, a staff attorney or a firm attorney, you can have somebody in-house. That's a contractual decision. But because we have people currently in place and the position that is vacant is the city attorney, what we were recommending in here, or stating in our recommendation, is that a 0.5 city attorney for that lead attorney we believe is sufficient. That person would handle planning board, the city council, and obviously any other larger issues that could come forward. If you had that person as a staff attorney, that person would have a level of expertise, and we would do what we do now, which is we contract out for other expertise that we need. Right now, land use, we have a lot of land use issues right now. We've been working with an outside firm to assist in that. One of the benefits, theoretically, that you would have with a firm attorney in that city attorney role is that that firm has a level of expertise within that. And so you may not have to have an outside attorney. It still would be within that firm. But again, it gets to you guys having an interview process with that firm and ultimately deciding that you like the principal attorney and that the level of depth within that firm is something that you believe would be beneficial and useful in conjunction with the skills that Kristen has and the work that we're doing, that we're currently working on. I will tell you that one of the things that actually started, and I think I've told the council this before, but one of the things that started earlier in some conversations that Kirsten Crawford and I had, which is carrying it out and has, I think, really come to fruition in looking at this analysis, is the administrative staff really need to take a stronger role and responsibility in knowing the code, evaluating the code, taking the first read of the code, and not acquiescing any thought or connection to the code to the attorney. And that is one of the examples I have about why you can't do an apples-to-apples comparison. Probably not a good analogy, but if you think about municipalities and parking tickets, you might have a municipality that writes X number of parking tickets, and another one that has the same number of FTEs but hardly writes any. And it's really what's the culture of that organization. Do you give a lot of warnings or do you write tickets? And you can't tell that without really drilling down, and it's ultimately a decision of the community through the council of which of those it is. But you could have the same FTE, you could have the same cost, and one would look incredibly efficient if you were looking for parking tickets written, and the other looking inefficient, yet they might both be accomplishing exactly what the community's desires are. What we have created, I think, in-house over the years, and appropriately so to some extent, not appropriately, but just through evolution, is I think the staff has gotten in a place where they don't think about the code. It's completely a separate thing, and I don't mean that literally, but it's a shift. It's not a cognizant part of what the administrative staff does, which has put a greater burden on the legal staff because we don't take that first shot at reading the code and saying, do I understand what it says? Do I think that this is a clear interpretation because it says X, Y, and Z? If I have a question, once I've read it, I can go to Kristen and say, this is how I read the code. Do you concur? And she can say yes, no, or there's a court case that's done this, that, and the other. And so making that shift obviously reduces the reliance and the need for greater FTE count within the attorneys and shifts some of that burden over. Some of the other areas I think we can make some efficiencies are in getting the templates updated, both things like contracts for service, contracts for construction, those types of things, where Kristen, again, can take a look at those and come up with a draft template. And essentially, and I'm oversimplifying to an extent, but essentially the staff person who's looking at it can use that, attaches the scope of service, make sure the scope of service is succinct, has the details in it. If there's anything unique or funky that comes from the company, we see it a lot in web companies as an example that don't work with municipalities a lot. They tend to, or from out of state, they tend to have some quirky things. But if we're not running into those, it's a regular company we're working on, just improve the quality of the templates, reduce the demand on the attorney's office. And that's part of where we have, and Kristen can jump in but I think we're in agreement that we believe 1.5 FTE meets our current needs. So there's, regardless of what direction you guys do, where you guys go on the attorneys, we are going to be making some different internal changes in-house about how, what the expectation that I have of the staff around the legal world and the interaction, I believe, will be improved between Kristen and the staff as we deal with legal issues moving forward. Because you guys have experience with an in-house attorney, jumping again to the recommendation, I don't think that
you can't post for a city attorney right now and then say, oh, we'd like to use a firm. It makes much more sense to take the time to interview a firm, talk to them, ask the questions of them, find out if there's a company that you believe would be worth entertaining further discussion with, and go that direction. If you don't like that at the end of the day, then you can always post for a full or part-time attorney, depending upon what direction that you want to go. So without belaboring it a lot, I think really the recommendation or the direction I'm looking for is give us the direction to do an RFP. We'll put that together. We'll get it out there. We'll work with you guys on putting together some questions that address a lot of the issues that you guys have raised. You'll have that opportunity to interview them, and we will pick up that discussion after you guys have interviewed them. So that's what I'm looking for tonight, but I'm certainly happy to answer any questions, and if you've got anything or comments that Kristen has as well.
Okay. Any questions, council? Phil?
Having worked with a contract firm in Old South Suburban, benefits of that. One of the things that wasn't necessarily outlined here was the breadth of expertise that we would anticipate tapping into in the, you can probably go out and take a look at 2 years or so. Because I mean, size of firms vary substantially on what they have in-house or they subcontract with as well. And I'd like to see, go with an RFP, and we're going with a single firm. Are they doing everything? Do they have the bench, borrowing the judge's term, to actually, have that breadth, or are they going to be tapping in beyond?
Certainly, I think that's, and we would initially, Kristen and I would sit down with the department heads and talk about, and we have to an extent, but we fine-tune it. What do we see coming up in the future? Councilman Taylor's talked about urban renewal authority type of need, and so we'd lay that out, but certainly that would be something else that we would encourage, and when we put the questions together, making sure that you guys are asking that exact question.
Yeah, because not every city has water rights or wastewater treatment plant or...
And there may be areas where you decide that, and I'm not going to think of the company we use right now for water, but you may say we're very pleased with that service that they're providing. It takes a long time to get up to speed on water rights, and not look for a firm that has that. And so part of what we would do when we get closer is really sit down with you guys when we put those questions together and talk to you in greater detail about those types of areas that we want.
Just having been a consultant, for a response to the RFP, you haven't told them what you're not going to do, you only tell them what you're going to do, and it sounds great, okay, but you start to get into some of those fringe areas and you realize, ka-ching. And then...
And realize you can structure a contract so there is no subcontract through them, but subcontracts come solely through us.
Right,
So, okay.
In the part that becomes probably a bigger piece, whether it's person or a firm, is going to be the expectations around response and access, and that becomes as important or more important going forward, regardless of which direction.
Yeah, and so a couple comments on that. One, we would certainly, it would be a condition of the RFP to respond and say, who are your other clients, what capacity do you have here, et cetera, that, and what's the expectation around response time, those types of things. And again, those are conditions of contracts that you ultimately put in place. One of the things that we believe in general is that with having Kristen in-house full-time, the vast majority probably, there's very few things that we can't wait on, and certainly if we can't, having somebody in-house addresses that issue for us. So the challenge then is, what are those other issues? How often would they come up? We have talked in a lot of detail around office hours on Tuesdays. How do we address council's questions? What types of questions have you had? Are those things that the deputy city attorney or an associate attorney, if it was a firm attorney, could handle, those types of things? But again, I think those are questions that you primarily, they get handled in contracts. That's where you lay out your expectations ultimately. But those are the types of questions that you should really drill down with them.
Well, and also the issue of potential conflicts.
Yep.
You know, who do they have on their client list? How do they handle it? Is it we don't
We got it.
contract with folks, or we have a Chinese wall? I mean,
Yep.
different ways to handle.
Yep, absolutely.
So, any other questions, or are we ready to give direction? Jim?
Well, I've always dealt with in-house attorneys, recognizing the fact that there have been situations where outside counsel has to be brought in order to do things. Whether we've dealt with the water law in the past and had to have special water attorneys to deal with that. We've dealt some with tax increment financing and had to have special attorneys who were knowledgeable in that area. I guess that I'm willing to try to look at an outside firm that would have enough expertise within their firm that we can utilize them without having to pay extra for some other firm to come in and do it. Are we going to have the opportunity to see the RFP before it goes out to firms?
You certainly can. My goal was not to have RFP by committee. If you would like to sit down with me and go over it, I'd be happy to do that. I'm just trying to avoid a lot of wordsmithing and those types of things. I mean, an RFP is intended to get the firms here. I'm guessing you're going to get 6 or 7 decent firms that have a level of qualification that you guys would bring them in and interview them, that we would put them in front of you. And then it's, as I said, it's really looking at them. Now, keep in mind, I mean, you guys are talking about the firm with all the additional resources. That is a level of it, but you don't have to choose those additional resources. What we're looking for and what we are recommending essentially is a 0.5, a half-time, probably a maximum, maybe more depending upon what's going on, but city attorney. That is a firm attorney. And so utilizing part of the benefit, of course, of a firm is that there are those other pieces. I'm just throwing on the table that you don't have to take those other pieces. I fully suggest you do, but just the way the conversation's going, because we do have separate bond attorneys, we have separate water attorneys, we've still got, one of the resources that we haven't used in the past to the level that we're currently using them, and we can certainly expand in the future, is CIRSA. And we're already paying CIRSA. They do a great job for us, got a great reputation, and that is a shift as well that can reduce our costs. So, but yeah, if you'd like to, Jim, I'd be more than happy. I just was trying to avoid committee debate on it. So,
Peggy?
So if I'm understanding correctly, the recommendation is to have a 0.5 city attorney?
ultimately, when we looked at what we currently have with other legal, with some of the shifts that I spoke to earlier, with what's on the plate and what we look forward to, we believe that a 1.5 FTE, which as I understand it, is what we had for a long time. I don't know what a long time means, but and that it's basically just within the last couple of years that we went to 2.0 FTE. And so we believe that 1.0 is an appropriate place. You've got a 1.0, I'm sorry, 1.5. You've got a 1.0 in place right now, so by definition, we're suggesting a 0.5.
So my question was, though, so the firm would provide a 0.5 city attorney who would then oversee the other legal issues
Correct.
and staff?
Yeah, I mean, you guys would ultimately decide
Okay, no, so
how you want that to
so I
happen.
just wanted to make sure that I was knowing that before I comment.
Yep.
Okay? I thought I might like this when I started reading this.
But then you didn't.
But I think I'm not liking this. I think we need a 1.0 here who is city attorney, and then a 0.5, however we get at that. I looked at two cities that are closest to us in size, Commerce City, 47,000, that have staff, attorney, Parker, 46,000, and then I noticed that the person that did this study for us, prior to his current position, was the contract attorney for Commerce City before their decision to move to legal services in-house.
Which was his partner.
No, I know. But
But yes.
apart from that, they moved from contract
It is,
outside to a city staff person, which says something or other, even if I can't totally know
I
what.
think the trend is to move in-house, it is not to contract.
I know, so,
Okay.
so part of me, I mean, right now, my thinking is that I want us to look for the 1.0 in-house, which
Okay.
is no comment against you. It's, you might get the job, who knows? But it's to move for a 1.0 in-house with a 1.5 total.
Okay.
I think having a person in-house, a city attorney in-house, staff person, allows us to have a stronger feel and connection to the community than through a firm. Now, can I necessarily prove that scientifically? No, but it's some kind of gut feeling. And so I'm still trying to wrap my head around all this, but that's where I'm coming from right
Okay.
now.
So a couple comments. One, in the RFP and in the recommendation, we are proposing that you ask a firm to give you the entire breadth of options. So we are not recommending that you just go to a firm and say, what would a 0.5 principal attorney cost us?
No,
We're-
but I mean, I understand.
You're talking about having a
I understand all
staff city
that.
attorney.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Do you not want to do a
The-
RFP?
Right.
You don't want to do an RFP, you
No,
want to
I
do
would like
interviews
us-
for a city attorney?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments, Bruce?
I'm very much in favor of doing the RFP. I think identifying the resources that are out there, getting a view as to what those resources could do, I think offers us a lot of upside and a much better perspective. Absolutely nothing says down the road we can't hire a staff person to fill the role, but at this juncture, I think there's a lot of value in going through this process.
Anyone else? Jerry?
Are you-
What's your preference?
I think go out for a quote, I think. I know in the past when, was Larry, Jim, do you remember, was Larry full-time, or what was he considered?
He was in-house, but he was not full-time.
And he was contract, wasn't he?
We paid a salary to him, and he also worked part-time for a firm downtown.
So he had his own thing. And Barry was what, full-time?
Say again?
Barry,
Bailey.
the assistant? No,
Bailey,
no,
yes.
no,
Brad Bailey.
before that.
Yeah.
I'm talking
Yeah.
before Brad.
Yeah, he was
Oh.
full-time.
Yeah, so Barry was full-time as well?
Barry was full-time, and so does Brady.
Okay, and then, but Larry was not in the office full-time.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah, I'm all for going out.
Actually, what you just described, I guess I didn't realize that, kind of matches what the current scenario would look like, so.
And it goes way back that it was very effective.
Bill? Jim?
I'm okay to go out with an RFP because we always can turn it down if we don't like it.
Okay.
I just wanted to know if you guys, can I work with Jim on the RFP? You guys good with that? Okay.
Okay. Okay. Any other comments, questions, or concerns? We're adjourned.